And the music in the Abbey was sensational.
It was, Joyce remembers, a freezing cold day. Luckily, the excitement of the occasion overrode the chills.
Well, first of all, we had to be there between 6 and 7 in the morning. And we had to have dresses on of light material. And although it was freezing cold, we could have a light stole around our shoulders.
Joyce, who went on to have a successful career in modelling, remembers the almost comically absurd spectacle of being dropped off at the front of Westminster Abbey by her boyfriend in an old converted Morris.
I remember that. And he was still then. He went back round Trafalgar Square and he got a great cheer in his car because most of them were very grand cars. But he said it was a sort of cheer that the dustman gets when he goes around. So maybe a few whistles too.
After a long wait, the ceremony was worth it. It was, she says, nothing short of incredible.
It was very impressive. And we were high up in the Abbey. It was a magnificent view, very high up, and it was magnificent. I mean, I've seen things that the French do. They do quite well. But I think we're the best at that. I'm watching with interest what happens to Charles. I think this is going to be refreshing.
As you watch the coronation on the television this time, no doubt your memory will take you back to that event back in '53.
Yes. Yes, I think it's going to be amazing for me to see it again. And I shall take it in more this time, looking on, than I really felt doing it when I was so young and so long ago. It's a big thing to organise, and I wish them well. It's going to be very exciting.
How wonderful to hear from 90-year-old Joyce Day there. Mark White reporting. Rail travellers are facing disruption again after RMT members backed further strikes over the next 6 months. Workers at 14 train operating companies have already announced plans to walk off the job next weekend. The strike will disrupt travel to the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. The result from the latest ballot saw a 70% turnout, with over 90% of union members voting in favour of further industrial action. Transport Minister Mark Harper says he's disappointed by the decision. A 33-year-old man has been charged with the murder of a woman stabbed to death in Brixton in South London earlier this week. Police believe 31-year-old Johanita Kosiwa-Dogby was attacked from behind as she walked home on Monday afternoon. Mohammed Nur has been charged with murder and grievous bodily harm after 2 women and a man were slashed in separate incidents last Saturday. The leader of Russia's Wagner group says he will pull troops out of Bakhmut by May the 10th if they don't receive fresh ammunition. Soldiers from the Russian mercenary force have been trying to capture the Ukrainian city since last year. In a big setback for the Russian invasion, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner group leader, says that his forces will have to withdraw from Bakhmut due to the lack of ammunition supplies and heavy losses. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Let's head over to Mark Longhurst, who's at Buckingham Palace for us.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed, and welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst, and 1 or 2 other rather important people here with me on this very important day, the day before the King's coronation. We had hoped to be with you a little earlier, but at 12 noon, on cue, a clap of thunder. And the clouds, well, the sky opened and we had a downpour here, so the crowds have actually disappeared to go and find umbrellas and some kind of sheeting. But we've had lots of comings and goings into Buckingham Palace behind us, with the whistles blowing as the royal motorcades arrive and depart. I'm glad to say, also witnessing this very important day, I have beside me Alistair and also Cameron. We've got the top team here, and we've been sort of looking over our shoulders at seeing all these cars coming and going, the whistles blowing. We've had the whole, well, nearly the whole royal family going to and fro here.
Yes, we certainly have. We've seen the King and the Queen Consorts, Prince and Princess of Wales. That's their final rehearsal at Westminster Abbey earlier. And then just before we came on air, Mark, we saw His Majesty the King go into Buckingham Palace via his motorcade. He's going to be attending the Realm Governors General and Prime Minister's lunch at Buckingham Palace with other members of the royal family. We also saw his youngest brother, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, travel in a separate motorcade into Buckingham Palace as well. So it looks like a lot of working members of the royal family will be there. Yeah,
this is interesting, Alistair, because we understood that the King was going to impose a 6 o'clock curfew for tonight. No more official duties, no more work. I want a bit of a rest before the big day. He's working harder than ever. It seems.
And goodness me, the rate of rehearsal as well.
Yeah.
It's been phenomenal. And I was minded that back in '53, the late Queen said to the then little Prince of Wales, who became heir apparent, I think, at the age of 4, remember this.
Yeah.
I hope in one sense he doesn't remember it too well, because there are significant changes in the running order, which there have been since they were first crafted and recorded in Latin back in the 8th century, and were only translated into English and the vernacular, I think, in the reign of James II. But there are significant changes. It will begin with the procession of faith leaders, and that Defender of the Faith versus Defender of the Faith, plural, has been brilliantly finessed by the King and the Archbishop of Canterbury.
And should we reflect that also Rishi Sunak, as a Hindu, will be reading from the Bible in the service? So that really indicates how this new king wants things to change.
And members of the House of Lords who are Jews, who are also Hindus and Sikhs, and Muslims, will also take an important role in the presentation of the regalia that is involved in this.
Now, we heard there was quite a big dress rehearsal as such earlier in the week. It's interesting they've had another one. They clearly want to make sure this is absolutely tied down. And I think it was only yesterday the Princess of Wales, when she was in the dog and duck, as they do, saying, I think we've got our ducks in a row.
Absolutely. They know that the eyes of the world will be watching them. And of course, you just have to see it here at Canada Gate, where we are. The world's media has come to London to view this historic
Well, they've disappeared
event.
for the moment. All gone under shelter.
Well, I mean, the other thing that's
perhaps,
worth remembering, with all due respect to the King and Queen as well, as the Dean of Westminster Abbey, who is not officiating, but it's his pad, as it were.
Yeah.
The Archbishop of Canterbury is the senior prelate, is officiating, but he's underlined how important it is for all of his people to rehearse as well, and the choirs to rehearse, and the organist to rehearse, because they don't want to put a foot wrong either.
Yeah, and perhaps one of those things might be toilet rolls. It's not widely known that back in 1953, apparently, all the toilet rolls disappeared from Westminster Abbey. So there was a last-minute scramble to try and find those. So I guess that's one of the things they've been rehearsing, make sure all the loos have got the toilet roll just in case.
Well, quite possibly, but at least there's only 2,300 people in the Abbey this time instead of 8,000.
Enough to go round.
Exactly. I was at Westminster Abbey yesterday outside us on our media platform there, and I could actually hear the choir rehearsing. It was echoing through the walls.
As another clap of thunder echoes through the background.
Yes, the weather is not looking great for tomorrow, actually, which is slightly concerning because the Air Chief Marshal predicted yesterday, but it's only a 50-50 chance that the fly past is going to happen.
No, I was going to ask you, when is that decision going to be made? Because clearly, if you've got lightning and thunder, that's a problem, but it's the cloud base as well, how low the cloud is going to be.
Absolutely. There's a number of contingency plans in place. Some are suggesting there's going to be a scaled back fly past. But if you remember back to 1953's coronation, the Queen Elizabeth II's, the weather was also atrocious that day, and what they did was delay the fly past until the early evening, around 5:15. So there is precedent to do that too.
Fascinating to speculate on the decision-making line, given that the Chief of the Defence Staff and the Chief of the Air Staff are both in the procession.
Yeah.
Tap, tap, tap. What do you reckon, Tony? I think Andy, go with it.
They've got their mobile phones with them just in case. But, I mean, there's an important aspect with sort of drawing parallels with 1953, because the fly past tomorrow will have World War II piston aircraft, Spitfire, Hurricane, and so on. But they've also got, state-of-the-art Typhoon fly-by-wire jets, all of them travelling at very different speeds, and they've got to try and make sure they've got the correct gaps between all these aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Battle of Britain Memorial flight, Lancaster, Hurricane, Spitfire, one of the great images And the Queen, the late Queen, is always said to have particularly loved the red arrows.
Yes.
But there were wonderful images we commented on at the
Yes.
time, going back to the Jubilee of the very young princes, particularly Louis,
With
having
the
things
and
pointed out. Yeah,
fingers in the
absolutely.
ears.
Hope Mike Tyndall's on duty.
Well, maybe quite possibly.
Anyway, the clouds are gathering. Hopefully they'll clear today, and that perhaps they won't be too bad for tomorrow. We've got an update from the Met Office for you a little later to actually assess the situation in detail. But let's reflect that also the clouds have been gathering for some politically. We'll turn to the local elections now. Indeed, what's been termed a pretty bad night for the Conservatives because they've been suffering significant losses across England in Rishi Sunak's first electoral test as Prime Minister. Tamworth, Brentwood and Essex, North West Leicestershire, East Lindsey, to name a few, falling from Tory administrations to no overall control. Then in Hertsmere, where Deputy Prime Minister, remember, Oliver Dowden is the MP, Tories losing control of the council there. And Labour, down in Kent, have taken Medway, a real significant gain from them, from the Tories, and will run that Kent council for the first time since, I think it's 1998, when that Medway was actually formed, that local administration. Let's get, well, we'll actually continue on those results as they're coming through and build you a picture, because it's not just the seats as such, it's the overall share of the vote that tells us what may happen at a general election. But let's speak now to Gina Miller, who is leader of the True and Fair Party, because Gina, clearly we're assessing who's voted and where, but there's also a question of those who weren't able to vote, bearing in mind the situation of the ID. And I think the Electoral Commission is saying we've got to look really at what went wrong here.
Absolutely right. Thank you for inviting me on, Mark. We knew when the Election Act passed last year that they needed time to bed in the changes that would require everyone to have certain forms of ID. And it's not universal, the forms of ID that were acceptable. But here in Epsom and Newell, where I'm standing, local people, but actually people around the country, have been emailing us with incidences that are making them very upset because they've been denied their democratic voice, ranging from people who tried to use their NHS ID and returned away and said that wasn't good enough, from women who have had a different name on their ID to their marriage certificates, but have gone along with their marriage certificates to prove that they are the same person, but they've been denied a vote and turned away. We've had people with immune problems, suppressed immune systems, who have tried to vote with masks on and were told that unless they took their masks off, they wouldn't be able to go in and vote. We've had other incidences of people saying they were told that they could use ID that didn't have or weren't in date, that had gone out of date, but they were turned away. So there's definitely issues with the entire system. And what we're seeing is that there wasn't ever a real problem with voter fraud. So we've got a solution that's come in for a problem that didn't really exist, that's now creating huge problems, we think, because nobody's collecting the data. We won't know the extent of these problems, but it's got to be sorted out before the general election.
Are you happy that the Electoral Commission seems to be taking that investigation very seriously and will be looking at the details? Because clearly a decision will have to be made before the general election as to how they roll that out. Because one of the concerns is that maybe it's the older generations who've been disenfranchised with a bit of confusion or a lack of any kind of digital ID, for a better term.
I think there are many people who have been disenfranchised across all age groups and different backgrounds. So we're seeing that it's not one problem or the other. This is a problem of lack of funding, lack of planning, lack of infrastructure, lack of awareness program. You know, if you're going to bring in a plan, you have to do it, or a legislation, you have to do it, knowing that all the backup is there to create an even playing field. And what this is resulting in is not an equal playing field. It's actually disenfranchising people who have the right to vote. This is a democracy. People have a right to turn up and be able to vote.
So what happens if the various investigations discover there is a significant rump of people that have been disenfranchised? I mean, we can't really rerun the elections, can we?
I don't think you can for not the local elections. And I said it's really sad that people wanted to have their voice heard on local issues and national issues that are really emotional, and they really want to have this opportunity. But what I think we can't undo it. What we're going to have to do is the government will have to decide, the Electoral Commission will have to decide what happens for the general election, because we haven't got that long. It's next year. And if it's not working, they may well have to bring in an amendment that takes out photo ID from the Elections Act.
OK, Gina, thank you very much indeed for bringing us your reaction. As we said, we'll be updating people on the results. I can just tell you at the moment, Labour running at 739 seats, Conservative 498, Lib Dems 365, Independent 234, and Greens 68. So still quite a few seats to come in. But as we say, it's that share of the vote that the psephologists, the election and pollsters are going to be looking at to see whether Labour have a chance in actually changing the government come a general election. Well, we've still got those dark clouds over us here at Buckingham Palace. We've had another clap of thunder. We'll try and stay in position for you, not get blown away. Lots more to come with us here on GB News Live. Stay with us.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back to GB News Live here down at Buckingham Palace. We remember that phrase, long to reign over us. It's rain with a slightly different spelling, R-A-I-N at the moment, because you can see these clouds gathering once more. They're pretty thick. We just had another clap of thunder and a bolt of lightning as well. However, we've just had I think the latest royal car to leave Buckingham Palace here with the blue lights flashing. And as you may be able to see behind us, it's not the crowds out in evidence at the moment. It's police in the high-vis jackets. Well, let's just reflect, of course, that everyone's being warned that police will treat people with a lower tolerance level during this coronation weekend and a change to the public order legislation as well. Let's bring in Mark White once more, our Home and Security Editor, who's down a bit further down the road at Westminster Abbey, who can join us. And Mark, certainly as you come down the Mall, Green Park, down there to Parliament Square, police evidence, plenty of people out just making sure that everything is being adhered to. And then, of course, we've got the plainclothes police from the Special Branch as well.
Yeah, I mean, lots of police and other security personnel around here. I should just say the clap of thunder and lightning, I'm not too far from where you are. It has now started raining. Before it was just absolutely lashing right into our live position. So hopefully it's not as big a deluge as it was earlier, but it is heading your way, I think. But yeah, that will probably be the biggest concern for certainly those that are gathering here and camped around the sort of Buckingham Palace, up the Mall, that kind of way, to try to get their best view of the royal procession up to Westminster Abbey tomorrow, and then back from Westminster Abbey down to Buckingham Palace again. You've got to feel for these people. Yeah, they've got their tents, but in this kind of weather it's pretty miserable. So they're clearly, Mark, well, we know they are very, very die-hard royal fans that want to get out, as we hear another clap of thunder there, that want to get out and pay their respects and see this incredible world event, because that's exactly what it will be. And you can't blame the King and Queen Consort, Prince William, for coming back here to Westminster Abbey today for that final set of rehearsals, their final opportunity really to just make sure that everything goes off without a hitch tomorrow, because of course this time tomorrow I think we'll probably be now at the end of the ceremony, and that procession will be making its way back down to where you are, and it will be, of course, the Golden State coach, that 261-year-old coach that has seen so many royal processions over the years. We're told it's a real bone rattler, and that the King and Queen will not be in that coach going to Westminster Abbey. That's going to be the Diamond Jubilee State coach, which is a little bit more comfortable, but on the way back it's going to be a bone-rattling, shaking journey, but it's spectacular because it is a beautiful looking coach.
Yeah, I gather that the suspension is very unsophisticated leather straps, and the nickname we gather is the creaky coach. We hope, of course, it's also waterproof. I mean, I think it's wood construction with gilt gold on the top of it, but it's showing its age to a certain degree. But you've touched on something quite interesting, of course, where we've talked about the policing operation in terms of security, but there is that husbandry, if you like, of looking after everybody. And I know here at Green Park, just behind us, there's an area where people can find some refuge and medical centres and so on. That may actually have to come into play if we continue to get this very bad weather.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, because you know, even if weather is perfect, because of the very significant numbers of people that will be packed into central London along the procession route, there are always issues with people that succumb to the conditions. It can be heat, it can be cold, it can be, you know, just crushing in the crowd, dehydration, fainting, all of the above. And that's why, as you say, they will have these aid stations manned by the London Ambulance Service, but also, of course, St John's Ambulance volunteers, always there for the big events, volunteers that do such a good job of looking after mass gatherings like this. And it's going to be a first-come, first-served situation tomorrow, so that's why we're expecting it to be very, very busy from very early on. And the advice is, if you want a space to get the best vantage point for this procession route, which is 1.42 miles long, so just under a mile and a half, considerably shorter than the 4-mile procession route for the 1953 procession of Queen Elizabeth II, but still a significant procession route. But it will be busy all of the way along, so you have to be there early, Mark, in order to do that. But don't worry, the organisers say, if you can't get into the procession route itself, there are these big parks at St James's, Hyde Park and Green Park, where they're going to set up huge display screens that people can gather. They can still take in the communal atmosphere, and they will have the added bonus of being able to watch this almost 2-hour historic ceremony here at Westminster Abbey.
And of course, you won't win many friends if you put your umbrella up along that route, but you may well need it at the moment. As you predicted, your rain is hitting us. The heavens are opening once more. Yeah, I blame you. However, we may try and blame the Met Office as well. We'll actually get that severe weather watch coming up as indeed the water starts dripping. I think it's time to head back to Rhiannon in the studio.
Thank you, Mark. Nice and dry here at the GB News studio. It's 12:30 for your top stories. The Conservatives have suffered heavy losses in local elections in England, with Labour and the Liberal Democrats both making gains. The Tories have lost control of 12 councils so far, including Windsor and Maidenhead, which has gone to the Lib Dems. Labour has gained 3, including Plymouth, Stoke-on-Trent and Medway. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's acknowledged some disappointing results, but denies there's been a big swing to Labour. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, believes he's now on course to becoming the next Prime Minister.
We've just taken Medway for the first time since 1998. That is a very, very good night for the Labour Party. We didn't just get it over the line, we absolutely smashed it. And it's the same story elsewhere. Same story in Plymouth, in Stoke, up in Middlesbrough. And these are the key battlegrounds as we go into the next election. And make no mistake, this means that we are on course for a Labour majority at the next election.
While Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey's been celebrating in Windsor, standing in front of a general election countdown clock with a sign saying, "Time's up" for Rishi Sunak. He says his party is making big gains across the country.
I'm really proud of the party. People have been voting for us, for our positive candidates who really work hard for their communities, for our policies on things like the health service and the cost of living. But I'll be honest with you, they've also been voting against the Conservatives. They really think the Conservatives let them down, or are out of touch and lack integrity. So it's a great night for the Democrats, and I think people now want a general election. They want this government out.
Well, the Prime Minister's been hosting world leaders arriving for the King's Coronation. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was first to arrive, followed by New Zealand's Prime Minister Chris Hipkins. Both are vocal Republicans, but have said they will swear allegiance to the King tomorrow. The Emir of Qatar's also arrived at number 10 and wished the King all the best ahead of tomorrow's celebration. The King and Queen Consort have now joined Rishi Sunak in hosting world leaders at Buckingham Palace. It follows a final rehearsal at Westminster Abbey earlier before the coronation. King Charles waved to the crowds gathered at the Abbey as his convoy arrived. TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark will be back in just a moment from Buckingham Palace. Stay with us. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities. especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live here at a very wet and windy, I'm afraid, Buckingham Palace. The skies are still pretty dark behind us. We've heard claps of thunder and other things falling over in the wind. And we've had bolts of lightning as well. So we'll stay with us or stay with you as long as we can. And let's reflect, of course, that we've also seen motorcades, a huge American motorcade with American Secret Service vehicles coming behind. We think that might have been Jill Biden, but we'll update you, of course, as we find out more. But, of course, everyone's preparing for the big day tomorrow to crown King Charles III. And part of that, extending the licensing laws. So revellers will be able to celebrate at their local until 1 o'clock in the morning and perhaps enjoy a choice of specially brewed royal ales. Of course, we saw a certain Prince of Wales yesterday at the Dog and Duck in Soho pulling a pint, I think, of Kingmaker. Well, our South East of England reporter Ray Addison has been getting them in for us.
We've got a couple of screens we'll be showing it on, which we don't get the TV out very often, so you know it's a special occasion when it is coming out.
There's a feeling of excitement at the King's Arms in Horsham. The bunting is out and the fizz is flowing as they prepare for the coronation of King Charles III. Jodie Monday is the landlady.
I think it's important as a pub in the community and a pub that's so strongly connected with the community that we do celebrate these events and give people an area and a space to celebrate such a big event.
As part of the nationwide celebrations, licensing hours have been extended over the weekend until 1 a.m. Jodie hopes this will help to attract revellers.
With the extended licensing hours, it's just invaluable to businesses, especially small independent businesses like ourselves. I just think people, when they're choosing how to celebrate over the weekend or what they're going to do, I just think will pop up in their minds. Yeah, we're hoping for a little extra business.
The coronation has inspired a raft of royal drinks. Over in Windsor, the Windsor and Eton Brewery is launching Return of the King, an ale designed to commemorate a historic moment. Matt Steed is the head brewer.
It's a traditional English ale recipe, but we wanted to use ingredients that really captured the story of who King Charles is. And it's really nicely balanced with organic hops that gives you this lovely freshly zested lime top note.
Bob Morrison is the brewery's marketing director. He says it felt important to reflect the monarch's passions.
It reflects a lifetime of devotion and duty to the country, but also a lifetime of passionate support for the environment. We would be delighted to welcome the King and the Queen Consort to come and have a drink here with us. If they can't come here, we'll send a beer to the castle, but they're welcome anytime.
Emma McClarkin is chief executive of the British Beer and Pub Association. She says the Coronation weekend will have a huge impact on sales.
Well, the beer and the pub sector have been through a really difficult time, and so these additional bank holidays and moments of celebration alongside those extended operating hours are really a very welcome boost. We're hoping it will create around 120 million in trade, a boost of an additional 17 million pints on an ordinary weekend, and that really will hopefully help support our publicans and brewers up and down the country that have been really trying hard to get back to stability post the pandemic.
The Coronation is a great chance to support your local and celebrate a moment in history. So whatever you're drinking, let's raise a glass and toast the King! Ray Addison, GB News.
He gets all the best jobs, doesn't he? Anyway, we've got a pretty good job down here at Buckingham Palace, despite the weather. And as we said, we saw that motorcade behind us with plenty of US Secret Service vehicles, Chevy Suburbans. Well, the reason is they've just taken Jill Biden to Downing Street. These are the pictures that we've just got in, where the wife of the US president has, well, with an umbrella, as one might in London, to meet the Prime Minister's wife with... a very heartfelt greeting there. That's Akshata Murthy with an official welcome to Downing Street as the Prime Minister's wife, handing the umbrella back. I think she might need that later when she leaves Downing Street as well. Alistair is still with me. Now, of course, there's been a lot of comment the fact the US president is not here, but clearly the next best thing is the US president's wife.
I think in a curious way, forgive me, that it might even be slightly better because Jill Biden, the First Lady, is desperately keen on education. She's a qualified teacher herself, cares about early years. And goodness me, she and the Princess of Wales will have a great deal to talk about because those are amongst her key things as well.
Close to
and it's also, when I was reading up on all of this as well, it's an interesting reflection on the Republicans saying, you know, this should all get rid of it and have a presidency and what have you. And I rather think the people of the United Kingdom have been expressing their own views in their little tents and camped out overnight.
Let's reflect as well that when you walk around Green Park here, the Mall and so on, an incredible number of American tourists here to see this event and sharing it as well, loving all the pomp and circumstance. And of course, it is the fact that if it had been President Biden coming here, the security would have been a nightmare. We probably wouldn't be able to walk down here without US Secret Service and so on. It's slightly lower key, obviously, because it's just Jill Biden.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was the Daily Mail that ran a piece saying how unusual it was that the King was inviting various members of European royal families to come as well. Not true, because if you look it up, as I know you will have done anyway, all of us will have done, back in '53 there were a lot of European royals as well, and an awful lot of them are related to each other.
Well,
indeed. Thanks to the great matchmaker, Queen Victoria.
Such is the nature of that, the German descendancy, of course. Well, talking of 1953, let's remember it did rain on the coronation in 1953. Whether it's quite as much as it's raining now and what's expected tomorrow, I don't know. But certainly it's pretty soggy for the police here still outside in the square and up to the Mall. But let's actually head a bit further up because Paul has been braving the conditions there with quite a few other people, Paul, braving the conditions. Of course, some of them camping out with these tarpaulins. How are they managing there?
Yeah, I'm going to go and chat to some of them in a minute. Look, if it literally long to rain over us, that's how it feels, quite frankly. But who can blame you? Look, a little bit of weather's not going to stop us, is it? Because we're British. But let's speak to Gillian and Alan, who join us, GB News fans as well. First of all, why do you feel you had to come to London?
To get into the atmosphere, really get to get into the mood. In the north of England, there isn't the razzmatazz as there is down here. So we left at 3 yesterday morning, got here for 7:30.
Right.
We've got a hotel, and we were down on the Mall from about 9:30. Yes.
9:30, 10. Yeah. Does this feel like razzmatazz to you? It does a bit, yes. Definitely compared to up north, in Wigan. In Wigan, which is where you're from. But, but why is it so important to be here? What's so great about, the coronation?
Oh, it's just a tradition, isn't it? Yeah. The royal family, to me, are just... I'm a true royalist and came for the Queen's funeral last year. And it's just something I felt I needed to do.
Yeah, and you've seen Charles and Camilla already, whizzing down here in their car?
Yes, and they waved.
Yeah. Did
you go wave back?
Yes.
Yeah, did you?
Absolutely.
That was personally for you, I think. That's personally for you.
Oh,
Listen,
that's what I said.
Yeah, thanks for speaking to us. Really appreciate it. I was going to just show you. Let's just show you how people are coping with the rain. You were asking, Mark. It's just a knock on here. Look, let's come and have a look in here. If we just come over here, cameraman Adam. Look, this is what it's like in here. How you doing, guys?
Yeah, it's British weather.
I was going to say it does. Yeah.
Smelly, isn't it?
Yeah. You said it. I'm glad you said it. Yeah. How are you dealing with this weather, though?
Oh yeah, it's a good British weather, isn't it? We're used to it. Typical.
And now it's sunshine, so you got the.
Yeah, we're going to get out now. Yeah,
we're going to just plan in our afternoon tea. What time it's dry to have our afternoon tea.
Yeah, because you're having clotted cream and scones later, aren't you?
Yeah, 2:30.
Classic, but you need to do it during a dry spell.
2:30, it'd be dry.
I think this is the last rain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Who have you seen whizzing up and down here? Because there's been quite a few people today.
The King.
William.
What, Elvis?
William. Yeah, Elvis.
Yeah.
And William.
William as well. Did you get any eye contact? Did they wave back?
To me, the King did.
Did he?
Yeah.
Personally for you.
Yeah, he saw me and he went, watch out.
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it?
Oh yeah, can't wait.
Yeah.
Better than the Ashes.
What? I said it, but that's an in-joke, because earlier I said I was more excited about the Ashes. But it's going to be a historic occasion. Which bit are you looking forward to tomorrow, seeing most of all?
All the soldiers and the marching and the pageantry of
All
it
of it.
all. Yeah,
All of it. And then all the atmosphere of everybody here and the flags, everything.
How many friends have you made?
Oh, loads.
Yeah.
We don't have a break, do we?
Come out.
Yeah.
Listen, we'll let you come out, but thanks for speaking to us.
No problem.
Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. So that's what happens, Mark, when it starts raining. Everyone disappears inside their tent. Or, if I just point you, if we come in this direction over here, you see the gazebo at the far end there. All of a sudden, all the tourists congregate under there. It's funny, they're all like they're waiting for a bus. But that's kind of how they're dealing with the weather here. People aren't really fussed. It's a really nice community atmosphere, if I'm honest. Everyone's getting to know everyone else.
Yeah, and isn't it wonderful? They're so optimistic. They're even wearing their sunglasses inside the tent. That's the British spirit for you, isn't it? They're never defeated. But
I thought you might pick up on that.
Yeah, and I think you might make quite a trade in GBNews umbrellas there if you've got a few spare to hand out. But anyway, let's brave the elements for a few more hours yet. Anyway, Paul, thank you for that. Back to you, of course, throughout the afternoon. But let's just catch up on something else that's been occurring while we've been talking about the big day tomorrow. Been a big day politically, of course, for all the major parties. The local election results proving rather difficult for the Conservatives and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, it seems. And indeed, Sir Keir Starmer, well, a pretty happy man. He's been celebrating what he's described as fantastic council results, telling jubilant supporters in those Labour-gained areas, Medway and Kent particularly, they're progressing, he says, towards a majority in Westminster. Liberal Democrats too, they picked up Windsor and maybe evidence of a lot of tactical voting to help them. Let's get the views now of Conservative peer Lord Robert Hayward, who of course is also a polling expert, loves crunching the numbers so much that he's actually got his own outfit doing it for him. Lord Hayward, thank you for your time. I know we're concentrating on the seats at the moment, but I guess it's a bit later when we get this share of the vote that we know what the real story is.
Yes, obviously immediately you get the results from each of the different local authorities. Then the real experts with the computers, my SADO colleagues that I know so well, they will produce what is called the national equivalent vote share, and that will be considered absolutely crucial for the different political parties in terms of what it indicates for the potential forthcoming election in 16, 18 months' time.
Yeah, of course, there are different issues for a local election. You know, people get very concerned about potholes, housing schemes, all these issues that local councils have to deal with. But clearly, a lot of the political parties are saying the message that they're getting on the doorstep is people are fed up, whether, you know, they're blaming their local authority for what's gone wrong, or, more importantly for a general election, that's central government.
Sadly, it is the case that large numbers of people vote according to their national views for the local authorities. So that's a reality, and there's no question about it. The Conservatives have had a bad time so far and will do over the next few hours as we get further results. Labour have done reasonably well, and the Lib Dems have done as well.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on that because obviously at the last general election the focus was on the so-called red wall and those seats that the Tories won. This time around I think the Tories have been worried about the blue wall and what the Liberal Democrat vote may do and whether people are voting tactically.
It does appear, certainly on the results we've got so far, that people have voted for the best way of kicking the Tories, whether it be Green or Lib Dem or Labour or Residents or whatever. There does seem to be a very marked operation of tactical voting in one place or another. As you say, less attention on red wall, because if the Labour Party are going to come close to a general election victory, they need to almost be taking for granted the Middlesbroughs, the Stoke-on-Trents. It's the Medways of this world that are actually important to the Labour Party for their future prospects at a general election.
Lord Hayward, thank you very much indeed for that, and of course we'll continue to keep people updated throughout the day on the results. Thank you for your time, but let's actually get the view of Alistair, who has followed many elections in his time, and this again maybe one of these sea change moments, and clearly until they get that share of vote they don't quite know which way it's going. But I guess for Rishi Sunak there's going to be a bit of disappointment that he doesn't seem to be making the inroads that they were hoping for.
I've absolutely no doubt about that at all, and I listened to what the Prime Minister had to say earlier on, and also the chairman of the party. I think, as Lord Hayward, with his years of experience as a Member of Parliament, and a number cruncher,
expert,
both the Commons and the Lords, he's absolutely spot on. The greatest single temptation for us and for the politicians is to over-interpret these things. But the anecdotal examples, and you talked about Medway, Medway and South Essex, the Thames corridors have always been very important in general elections in the past, and if Labour genuinely are doing quite well here and there, then that does matter. But I think you're also right to underline the real threat to Sunak and the Conservatives by the Liberal Democrats in what's been called the blue wall, because all of those by-elections that we both covered ourselves show that there's nowhere sacrosanct for the Tories anymore. And I think it was Labour or the Liberal Democrats gave the Tories a hammering in Maidenhead as well. Anecdotally,
yes.
a former Prime Minister's parliamentary constituency.
Indeed. And so Ed Davey, as he's describing it, he's got a grin like a Cheshire cat today. But, of course, the other aspect...
change there.
Talking about grimaces or grins, the other aspect, of course, when we talk about a general election, that people will be deciding maybe between Starmer and Sunak. It's not just about issues. Now, this is interesting because Sunak is starting to get a bit of momentum in terms of his personal poll ratings.
A bit is very important, but also he's taking a hammering amongst the commentariat for chopping and changing, university tuition fees.
And can he deliver on these promises, particularly stop the vote?
And there's also the Sue Gray thing, where you appoint someone who was, as it were, almost a hired assassin to take Boris Johnson out as your chief of staff. That's still not playing terribly well. It's also worth remembering that the last time that Labour did really well, several underlinings there in local elections, was back in Blair's day. Starmer ain't no Blair.
No.
Period. End of argument.
Yeah, and he hasn't got a cabinet or a cabinet in waiting around him that maybe matches up to what Tony Blair had.
There's no Charles Clarke, there's no Gordon Brown, there's no John
Robin
Reid.
Cook, of course, who was there at the time, you remember as well. So,
Ethical foreign policy. Great man.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We'll see what, of course, comes in with the results. We'll see what happens to this weather as well, because there's a big question about the fly past and, of course, all those other arrangements for tomorrow. We'll have the latest from the Met Office, that coming up. Stay with us here on GB News Live.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1 o'clock. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst, here live at Buckingham Palace this Friday. Well, the crowds have been braving the weather with the torrential rain, lightning and thunder, but they are gathering along the Mall and outside Buckingham Palace as the clock ticks down to tomorrow's coronation of King Charles. We'll have the latest from all those who've been braving the elements. Indeed, though, could the weather rain on the parade tomorrow? The Royal Naval and RAF fly past may be cancelled because of the conditions. We'll be speaking to the Met Office for you a little later. And don't forget, of course, all those local election results coming through. It seems to have been a tough night for the Conservatives, but a good day for certainly that man, Keir Starmer, and the Liberal Democrats too. But what could it mean for a general election? We'll be crunching the numbers and getting the bigger picture for you. But before we start, let's get an update on all the latest headlines. Rhiannon's waiting for us.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom.
The Conservatives have suffered heavy losses in local elections in England, with Labour and the Lib Dems both making gains. The Tories have lost control of 12 councils so far, including Windsor and Maidenhead, which has gone to the Liberal Democrats. Labour has gained 3, Plymouth, Stoke-on-Trent and Medway. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has acknowledged some disappointing results, but denies there's been a big swing to Labour.
We're making progress in key election battlegrounds like Peterborough, Bassetlaw, Sandwell. But the message I am hearing from people tonight is that they want us to focus on their priorities and they want us to deliver for them. And that's about halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing debt, cutting waiting lists and stopping the boats. That's what people care about. That's what they want us to deliver. And that's what I and the government are going to work very hard to do.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, believes he's now on course to become the next Prime Minister.
We've just taken Medway for the first time since 1998. That is a very, very good night for the Labour Party. We didn't just get it over the line, we absolutely smashed it. And it's the same story elsewhere. Same story in Plymouth, in Stoke, up in Middlesbrough. And these are the key battlegrounds as we go into the next election. And make no mistake, this means that we are on course for a Labour majority at the next election.
While Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey's been celebrating in Windsor, standing in front of a general election countdown clock with a sign saying "Time's up" for Rishi Sunak. He says his party is making big gains across the country.
I'm really proud of the party. People have been voting for us, for our positive candidates who really work hard for their communities, for our policies on things like the health service and the cost of living. But I'll be honest with you, they've also been voting against the Conservatives. They really think the Conservatives let them down, are out of touch and lack integrity. So it's a great night for the Democrats, and I think people now want a general election. They want this government out.
World leaders have been arriving at Downing Street today ahead of the King's coronation. The latest to be welcomed just moments ago was Joe Biden's wife. Leading the US delegation, the First Lady Jill Biden was met at Downing Street by Ekshata Murty, the Prime Minister's wife. Well, earlier, Rishi Sunak welcomed Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and New Zealand's Chris Hipkins. Both are vocal Republicans, but they've said they will swear allegiance to the King tomorrow. The Emir of Qatar has also been to Number 10 and wished the King all the best ahead of tomorrow. Meanwhile, King Charles and the Queen Consort have been hosting a lunch at Buckingham Palace for leaders of countries where the King is head of state. It follows a final rehearsal this morning at Westminster Abbey for the coronation. Later, His Majesty will meet Commonwealth leaders, and this evening he and other royals will host a reception for overseas guests. Meanwhile, people travelling on the railways this weekend will be told to mind the gap by a very special voice indeed, by none other than the King himself. Joined by the Queen Consort, they've recorded an announcement to be played at every railway and underground station across the UK all weekend and Bank Holiday Monday.
My wife and I wish you and your families a wonderful coronation weekend.
Wherever you are travelling, we hope you have a safe and pleasant journey.
And remember, please mind the gap.
Almost worth taking the train for. Rail travellers, meanwhile, are facing disruption again after RMT members backed further strikes over the next 6 months. Workers at 14 train operating companies have already announced plans to walk off the job next weekend. The strike will disrupt travel to the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. The result from the latest ballot saw a 70% turnout, with over 90% of union members voting in favour of further industrial action. Transport Minister Mark Harper says he's disappointed by the decision. A 33-year-old man has been charged with the murder of a woman stabbed to death in Brixton in South London earlier this week. Police believe 31-year-old Johanita Kosiwa-Dogby was attacked from behind as she walked home on Monday afternoon. Mohammed Nur has been charged with murder and grievous bodily harm after 2 women and a man were slashed in separate incidents last Saturday. Elsewhere, the leader of Russia's Wagner group says he will pull troops out of Bakhmut by May the 10th if they don't receive fresh ammunition. Soldiers from the Russian mercenary force have been trying to capture the Ukrainian city since last year. In a big setback for the Russian invasion, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner Group leader, says that his forces will have to withdraw from Bakhmut due to the lack of ammunition supplies and heavy losses. Serbia's president says a mass shooting in a village near Belgrade was a terrorist attack. Police have arrested a 21-year-old suspect after 8 people were shot dead. 13 others were wounded. It's the second mass shooting around the capital in as many days. A 13-year-old boy shot dead 9 children at a school on Wednesday before turning himself in. Back here, schools say they're increasingly struggling to recruit teachers with tens of thousands of vacancies. The Recruitment and Employment Confederation says issues over pay aren't being addressed. Teachers are embroiled in an ongoing dispute with more strikes threatened later this year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's head back to Buckingham Palace for Mark Longhurst and GB News Live.
Yes, thank you, Rhiannon, and indeed welcome back here to Buckingham Palace, where I'm glad to say no claps of thunder, no bolts of lightning this hour. And the clouds, they're beginning to break a little bit. And I have to say that we have our top team still here in place. They're drying out too. Alistair and Cameron with us here. Gentlemen, thank you for being here on this, well, pretty dismal start to the day, but it's beginning to break up a little bit. And one thing we have seen, Cameron, behind us is royal motorcades coming to and fro pretty frenetically, and the reason we think now is that there may have been, a full dress rehearsal at the Abbey earlier?
Yes, we believe so. We have seen some photographs of Prince William inside a car. Have a look on social media channels if you haven't seen them, because I'm not sure if we've got them. But he was wearing what appeared to be some kind of robe or regalia. So, because of course it's very different rehearsing in a normal suit compared to the grand regalia which we're going to see tomorrow.
Well, you've got all that trailing behind you and getting caught and everything.
Exactly,
yeah.
robes.
And that's one of the Prince of Wales' duties tomorrow, is to assist in giving the King the royal regalia.
Yeah.
And we know that many of the vestments will be ones that were used by, going back to George V.
Absolutely, and the King and Queen Consort's robes of state when they enter the Abbey and robes of estate when they leave the Abbey will be held up by 8 young pages, and of course they need to practice holding them, one of which is Prince George, of course future King himself, and Gus Lopez will be one of the pages to his grandmother, the Queen Consort, and Gus has actually broken his arm, as we understand it, so he's going to be in a sling tomorrow.
This is
but it's still going to
Call of Duty.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Definitely wouldn't miss it. And one of the Chumley boys as well, whose father, of course, I mean, they're both great friends of the Prince of
one of the King's pages.
But he was the Lord Great Chamberlain before Lord Barrington.
But I think that there are quite a few politicians, or at least members of the House of Lords, who've been a little bit disappointed they're not allowed to wear their full ermine robes because, of course, of the whole issue of fur and the rest of it. So that's been slightly controversial, hasn't it?
Certainly has been controversial, but what also is controversial is the ballots, which some of the lords and politicians had to enter in order to get a seat inside the Abbey, because, of course, there's only 2,300 seats inside. For the late Queen's coronation in 1953, there was around 8,000, so it's clearly had to be scaled back quite significantly. And in this modern day and age, the King and Queen Consort were very keen to include representatives from charities and causes which they care so much about.
Now, one of the sort of main players from previous years in all these events hasn't been seen in the back of these cars, and that is Harry, the Prince of Sussex. We still don't know, I think, the seating plan for the Abbey as to where he's going to be, or even if he's going to be part of the balcony. I gather they still haven't released who's going to be standing where.
We certainly don't. Buckingham Palace confirms that Prince Harry would be attending the coronation of his father. We don't know if he has yet landed in the United Kingdom or whether he'll land later today or tomorrow morning. Interestingly, the press releases we're getting from Buckingham Palace constantly refer to now the working members of the royal family rather than just the royal family. And Prince Harry is not a working member of the royal family. So presumably he's not going to be appearing on the balcony.
And nor the Duke of York, let's remember, as well.
Nor the Duke of York either. A source told me the working assumption was that it would only be working members of the royal family on the balcony, plus their children. Although that has not been confirmed, perhaps there'll be a last-minute addition, who knows. But clearly it just shows the difference, doesn't it, between the working members and Prince Harry and Duke of York.
And I made a mental note to ask you when I next saw you, when I was reading some stuff over the last couple of days, and that is the shift to not only the front-line working members of the royal family, but clearly the King's favourites, his sister Princess Anne, who has a crucial role.
The hardest working royal.
Hardest working one at all. Her charities are all over the place as well, and also the recently elevated Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh.
As they are.
Yes.
Big buddies of the Queen, as well as very, very close to the King. And that stuff's been coming out from Buckingham Palace day after day after day. New titles, new roles, new jobs.
Absolutely, and the Princess Anne is going to be the golden stick in waiting. Traditionally, of course, that was the. She will be on horseback, and she famously made the joke earlier this week during an interview that at least she knows what she's going to have to wear on the day because she will be wearing military uniform.
And she's an Olympian equestrian.
Yes, she's used to riding a horse, isn't she?
Reflected, if it doesn't eat hay or fart, she's not interested. Just put that in as well. But the other aspect, as we sort of keep an eye on the clouds, is what's going to happen for this fly past, because they're going to have to make a decision at some time. And it's the RAF, it's the Army Air Corps, it's the Royal Naval Squadrons as well, Fleet Air Arm. All these services come together. And, of course, aircraft of different vintage and different speed.
Absolutely, and of course some are more equipped to fly in bad weather than others, and that's all going to be taken into consideration. Air Chief Marshal said yesterday that it's a 50-50 chance that it will go ahead due to the weather forecast. I suspect there are a number of contingency plans. Some may be the scaling back of aircraft. Only the aircraft which can fly in that weather will fly in the fly past. And in 1953, it was horrific weather. So for the fly past for Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, that was actually delayed by three or 4 hours, flying past Buckingham Palace at 5:15 rather than 2:15, which is what it's scheduled to be.
Anyway, I can feel the sun on my back now, which is good news. But we will get you a proper update, detailed update from the Met Office as to what is going to be happening. I mean, not only just today, if you want to come down here and join the celebrations on the Mall, but more importantly tomorrow, if you've got a street party, a garden party, or heading up to London to see the occasion itself. More from here in a moment. Let's also reflect that we've had behind the scenes a lot of developments on the political front, those local election results coming through as we've been talking, and it's a pretty bad night for the government and the Prime Minister, but Rishi Sunak vowing to push on with his agenda. He's reassured staff at Conservative campaign headquarters, insisting he is not detecting any massive groundswell of movement towards the Labour Party or excitement for its agenda, close quotes. Let's get the views now of James Johnson, who can join us. James, you're a former Downing Street pollster who worked under Theresa May, of course, so you've been inside that Tory party machine. What do you think will be going on there at the moment? A slight air of panic, do you think?
I think that they were expecting these results to be bad. I think they're probably slightly at the worst end of what they were expecting. But look, they know, as do we, that there's 12 to 18 months before a general election. These local elections clearly have given them a bit of a bloody nose, but local elections often more about local issues, easier to vote for independents or Lib Dems, easier to punish the government without consequence. No doubt this was a good night for the Labour Party, but I don't think it shows at all what Labour are claiming, which is that it shows they're on track to win a majority at the next general election. I think it shows that it's advantaged Labour for the next election, but that it is still all to play for.
But do you think there is a worry about what they call the blue wall seats, where the Liberal Democrats, I mean, they've taken Windsor, of course, and indications perhaps they may be doing quite well down in the West Country and so on. And that, with also losing the red wall seats to Labour, that could really hurt the Tories.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if these results, I mean, Professor Michael Thrasher has just come in with his projections of what the vote share would look like if it was replicated across the country, and they have Labour on anything between an 8 to 10 point lead. That is good for Labour, but not heading towards sort of massive landslide territory. Now, it is true that if the Lib Dem performance in these elections was replicated in a general election, then that would be very, very bad for the Conservatives. I'm sceptical about whether that translates in a real-world environment, and that's because when you're at an election, I mean, when you're at a general election, you're thinking about who's going to run the country. You're thinking about Rishi Sunak versus Keir Starmer, and the Conservatives are hoping that they can bring some of those Lib Dems in those blue wall areas back on board to hold their nose and vote Tory at a general election.
So you still think that they'll be approaching it in that presidential way, if you like? It'll be Sunak versus Starmer. But again, if that's going to be the case, they've really got to get these pledges delivered, particularly stop the boats and all the other things that he's spoken so publicly about.
Yeah, and I think that's where, these results sort of show us what we already knew. There's a narrow path to victory for the Conservatives. It is narrow, it's very narrow, but it is possible, and it requires the delivery on those pledges. It requires inflation to come down dramatically by the end of the year, and it requires a forward-facing vision from Rishi Sunak. But there are still profound doubts about Keir Starmer in the focus groups with swing voters, both those who defected, who've already said that they're going to vote Labour, and who are now saying they don't know how they would vote. Keir Starmer wasn't on the ballot yesterday. Rishi Sunak wasn't on the ballot yesterday either. Most people were voting either on their general feeling of how the country was going or on local issues. And that's the big question now. So, yeah, I think they absolutely will be going for that presidential strategy. It's not a given. They need to perform and deliver. But that is their best bet if they want to try and narrow this gap. And it's worth very quickly saying, Mark, that the national equivalent vote share projections that have come out do indicate, if they were replicated nationally, a hung parliament with Labour as the largest party. That is not the 90s style wipeout that a lot of people were forecasting just a few weeks and months ago.
Yeah, for New Labour and Blair at that time, of course. But obviously we still reflect we haven't got the share of vote figures, which will be the key element until perhaps tea time a little later. But James, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's bring in Alistair once more, just to bring his thoughts. But, asking James about any sense of panic in the Tory party. What we have heard from Jacob Rees-Mogg and others is reclaim the party. The right wing of the party are getting a bit edgy about this.
Yeah. And they spent, in my view, and I've interviewed her twice, the party in recent months has spent far too much time rubbishing Liz Truss and what she stood for. But if you listen...
Low taxes particularly.
Absolutely. Yeah. But if you listen to an awful lot of Tories, and I chat to all political people, I'm not particularly partial one way or the other, then it is crystal clear that Jacob, as is so often the case, is on the money. That if the Tory party can go into that general election delivering a genuine promise to reduce taxes from the highest level in 70 years, as well as reducing spending, and recent economic data has suggested that they may well have scope for that, then I think they will land some killer blows on Sir Keir Starmer and on the Labour Party.
But I guess that the problem for all these political parties is they are reliant on that inflation figure, how quickly that's going to come down. Is the Bank of England going to raise rates yet again to push that? Because we've seen another rate rise with the ECB and the Fed in the States. And this is, of course, where people have been telling all these people campaigning, we're hurting. This is a real cost of living crisis that we're going through.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And, of course, it was Gordon Brown, who you mentioned earlier on, and Ed Balls, who gave the Bank of England independence over setting interest rates according to an inflation target. So it's up to the governor and his team of people, and if interest rates come down, then clearly that will have a huge significance. But I'm increasingly worried about this thing that Starmer seems to have invested very heavily in, and that is when he says to people, the government have done nothing at all about the cost of living crisis.
Or crashed the economy. That was the other phrase.
That's going back to Liz Truss, and it's playing a silly game. Because the reality is that every taxpayer listening to this conversation and listening to Sunak and Starmer knows that we have paid thousands and thousands and thousands in more taxation to bail people out during the cost of living crisis, to try and keep energy prices down a little bit longer than Sunak wanted to. Always remember that. And a whole lot of people on benefits just in the last couple of weeks will have got another 300 quid down.
£301,
so you
yeah.
cannot be taken seriously as a political leader who would be Prime Minister if you're saying to people, this government's done nothing on the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
It simply doesn't stand up to any examination.
Yeah, and just one last thought. I mean, I guess all the parties will be doing their assessment as to, do we go long, wait as long as possible before going to a general election, or do we actually bite the bullet and start getting things in place now?
I've no doubt at all that it was only the Conservatives that have to make that decision, because it was a change in law that did away with the 5-year Parliamentary Act, which was came out of the coalition government with Dave Cameron and Nick Clegg. So Sunak can go when he wants, and it will be just a question of poring over all of the economic data, because it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
Clinton's famous economic advisor said.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the economy's stupid, and maybe the weather for us on the other aspect of what's going to happen tomorrow. The breeze is picking up a little bit, but clearly it's better than it was before. Still vehicles coming to and fro. We'll keep you updated with all the comings and goings, and of course all those results on the local election as well. Stay with us for the very latest here on GB News Live.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back to GB News Live here down at Buckingham Palace. We just had a bit of excitement here because we've had Sparky, the official Met sniffer dog coming through here and just checking and everything. So they're still taking their security very, very seriously here and saying that obviously they are just making sure every area is secure, because obviously we are so close to the Mall here and Buckingham Palace, the route of the coronation processions tomorrow. But let's just reflect on what's been happening elsewhere with the local election results. I can just update you. Latest we've got with plenty more seats to come through. Labour 921, Conservative 580, Liberal Democrats 449, Independent 256 and Greens 83. Although, as we've been trying to tell you, obviously it is the overall share of the vote, which we might know by tea time, that might give an indication as to where things will go for a general election. But in detail, Labour has pulled off a significant political shock by defeating Andy Preston in a very tight mayoral race up in Middlesbrough. Now, the party's candidate, Chris Cook, has swept to victory in an incredibly narrow contest. It came down to just 760 votes. So Labour won with 10,956 to Mr Preston's Independent, of course, 10,196. So let's head to Middlesbrough now and speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's been following events there. Darren, what lessons are they trying to learn from this up there?
Well, it has, as you say, come from nowhere, really, in some ways, this political shock. We know that Labour had obviously wanted to gain back the morality here in Middlesbrough. They have held it before, but actually, for lots of time, it's been held by independents. But that changed last night, as you say, when Chris Cook pulled off that political shock and won it for the Labour Party. We know that the independents who had been standing, Andy Preston, who had done 4 years, essentially lost that, though it was pretty narrow. When it comes to the council results, we're still waiting on them here in Middlesbrough. They are trickling in. Labour winning a couple of wards of independence at the moment, but we're not expecting a full declaration until around 3 o'clock this afternoon. Elsewhere in the northeast, Labour managing, perhaps unsurprisingly, to hold on to Newcastle, to South Tyneside, to Sunderland's as well. But it is actually here in Middlesbrough, in Stockton and in Hartlepool that we're still effectively waiting the results. Labour expecting, though, let's be honest about this, to do pretty well. I think they are expecting to wrestle back control of the council here, but quite extraordinary results in different parts of the country, clearly mapping out where Labour are starting to kind of gain back ground, if you like, from the Conservative Party. We know in Stockton that Labour, in Stafford, I should say, have taken control, and also a lot of focus on Stratford-upon-Avon. Now, that is Nadeem Zahawi's seat. You may remember, of course, he had to resign from the cabinet over his tax affairs. Lots of reports emerging that the Lib Dems could take that from the Conservative Party. So Labour seemingly rebuilding parts of the Red Wall back again. Stoke-on-Trent, the perfect example of that, along with Bolsover in the north and the Midlands. Also winning, as you've been reflecting on your programme, in the Medway in Kent, those seats won by Tony Blair. But fundamentally, what will also worry the Conservative Party is that the Lib Dems are sharing in these electoral spoils, if you like, and seem to be doing well in Surrey, in Windsor, but also in Stratford-upon-Avon as well.
Yeah, and clearly the blue wall maybe now as much of a concern as the red wall. But the other thing that the candidates are saying is what they've been picking up on the doorsteps when they've been campaigning. And is this, just people being fed up with the economic situation, the financial hardship they find themselves in, and wanting to kick back against what they saw with Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in terms of the government's dealings with major questions?
Yeah, it's always quite difficult to disentangle essentially what is at play in local elections. Local politics matters. It's, local politics decides when your bin gets collected, when the potholes are filled in, when you've got access to your local parks and amenities. Local politicians do have day-to-day control over large aspects of people's lives, and those local issues will, of course, play out in different ways in different parts of the country, depending on the political makeup. But you're also right, national politics clearly for voters plays a part as well. And you're right, you speak to voters across the country, they'll argue about change and dissatisfaction with the government is quite strong, not least of all after the tumultuous year we've seen within the Conservative Party. They may actually hold on to the fact that, you know what, things probably won't get as bad as they were last year. And yes, there's been a really significantly bad night for the Conservative parties, but it's not been a complete and utter collapse. But in the end, the big question is, how is this going to play in to that national Westminster politics? Local elections create the mood music, if you like, the weather in Westminster. Clearly a very, very bad night for the Conservatives, will weigh heavily on Rishi Sunak. But for Labour, is this enough of a breakthrough to claim that they are on course to win the next general election? At the moment, I don't think you can go quite as far as that, because it's not just Labour who've done pretty well. Lib Dems and Greens have done as well, and that's split, as I say, those electoral spoils, and that makes Labour's argument a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Sir Ed Davey with a big smile on his face, of course, because of what happened, as you're saying, in Windsor. But what do you make of this well, it's not an announcement, an indication from Jacob Rees-Mogg and others that, you know, the Tory party needs to move further back to the right? I gather there's some sort of meeting this weekend, maybe, for asking people to come and reposition the party. I mean, is there a sense of panic?
So, I'm not sure that we're here in a sense of panic, but yes, I think the Conservative Party will do some soul-searching over the next couple of weeks. There had been a sense that actually Rishi Sunak might be able to claw back some of the support the Conservative Party had lost in its more traditional heartlands, in the home counties, for example. Now, that does not seem to have happened. The Lib Dems do seem to have made quite significant gains there, and we know that Labour have made gains elsewhere in the south. So that argument around Rishi Sunak doesn't seem to have held quite as strongly as some might have suggested, Mark. But you're right in saying there is a section of the Conservative right. This was exemplified last summer by Liz Truss's campaign, who feel that taxes are at the highest level since the end of the Second World War, that is not very conservative, and if they want to win the next election, it's not necessarily even about who the leader is. They need to get back to core conservative values, and I suspect we'll hear that campaign grow louder in the days and weeks to follow. All I would suggest, though, is what's interesting is that the parties that seem to be gaining from the arguments put forward that the Conservatives aren't being conservative enough are those in the centre ground, are the Lib Dems, are the Greens to a degree. They're not the parties slightly further to the right, like UKIP or the Reform Party, who have not made significant gains in all of this. So it's going to be interesting how that argument plays out. All I would say is if you look at who's winning those seats, it's actually parties who are on the centre ground rather than further to the right.
Darren in Middlesbrough, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's just update you here at Buckingham Palace. I can just see behind me a huge phalanx now of police motorbike outriders. There's quite a bit of activity. There are more cars coming down Birdcage Walk there and into the square. So plenty of activity. We'll update you on what that might mean. There has been a rumour there might be a walkabout coming up, but we'll have those pictures for you as it happens. But let's get an update now on all the other headlines and head back to Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:34. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Conservatives continue to suffer heavy losses in local elections in England, with Labour and the Liberal Democrats both making gains. The Tories have lost control of 14 councils so far, including Windsor and Maidenhead, which has gone to the Lib Dems. Labour has now taken control of East Staffordshire, bringing their gains so far to 4. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has acknowledged some disappointing results, but denies there's been a big swing to Labour. Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer believes he's now on course to becoming the next Prime Minister.
We've just taken Medway for the first time since 1998. That is a very, very good night for the Labour Party. We didn't just get it over the line, we absolutely smashed it. And it's the same story elsewhere. Same story in Plymouth, in Stoke, up in Middlesbrough. And these are the key battlegrounds as we go into the next election. And make no mistake, this means that we are on course for a Labour majority at the next election.
While Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey's been celebrating in Windsor, standing in front of a general election countdown clock with a sign saying "Time's up" for Rishi Sunak. He says his party's making big gains across the country.
I'm really proud of the party. People have been voting for us, for our positive candidates who really work hard for their communities, for our policies on things like the health service and the cost of living. But I'll be honest with you, they've also been voting against the Conservatives. They really think the Conservatives let them down, or are out of touch, and lack integrity. So it's a great night for the Democrats, and I think people now want a general election. They want this government out.
World leaders have been arriving at Downing Street ahead of the King's coronation. The latest to be welcomed is Joe Biden's wife, leading the US delegation. The First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, was met at Downing Street by Akshata Murthy, the Prime Minister's wife. Earlier, Rishi Sunak welcomed Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and New Zealand's Chris Hipkins. Both are vocal Republicans, but they said they will swear allegiance to the King tomorrow. Well, King Charles and the Queen Consort have been hosting a lunch at Buckingham Palace for leaders of countries where the King is head of state. It follows a final rehearsal this morning at Westminster Abbey for tomorrow's coronation. Later, His Majesty will meet Commonwealth leaders, and this evening, along with other royals, King Charles will host a reception for other overseas guests. This is GB News TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2605 and €1.1446. The price of gold is £1,615.91 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,742 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live here at Buckingham Palace with lots of excitement because, as I was updating you, we've had Sparky, the Met Police sniffer dog, joining us to check our position here, security being taken very seriously. And it might give an indication that, well, we might have a bit of activity shortly because we've also seen behind us lots of police motorbike outriders gathering, lots of vehicles as well. Cameron is with us here for what might be a bit of a surprise, because, I mean, there is a tight deadline because we've got the 2 o'clock meetings of the Commonwealth Heads of Government.
Yes, the King is expected to be at a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting at Marlborough House on the Mall. We don't have an exact time for that yet, but we do know it's early this afternoon because, of course, he's got the big diplomatic reception at Buckingham Palace tonight. But there is a lot of activity on the Mall at the moment. Lots of people in suits, lots of cameras, and, of course, lots of people have been camped out for a while now, haven't they?
Do you think that they might actually get a glimpse of something they've been waiting for?
I think perhaps they might see one or two special guests, but of course it's not been confirmed. We'll have to wait and see. We do know that the King, Queen Consort, members of the other members of the royal family have been attending perhaps a little bit of an informal lunch, well, as informal as you can get at Buckingham Palace, of course, for the Governor-Generals of the 14 other realms where the King is still head of state.
So
and
still that soft power being employed.
Yes, and the Prime Ministers of those realms as well. So that, we believe, concluded not that long ago. As far as we're aware, the King, Queen Consort, Prince and Princess of Wales are still inside Buckingham Palace. As you said, there's lots of motorbikes outside the gates.
And the gates are open as well, which is interesting. And we've got police inside those gates, which is an interesting signal as well before anyone comes out. But I'm just reflecting that I remember, a few weeks ago we were being told that the King said, I want a 6 o'clock curfew. I don't want anything interrupting my preparations for the big day. I mean, he's got a really packed schedule today, isn't he?
Oh, he absolutely has. And I think you were saying, Mark, there were some rumours that he wanted everything wrapped up by 6 p.m. on the day before the coronation to make sure he was ready and energised for arguably one of the biggest days of his life, certainly as sovereign. But you know how personable the King is, the Prince and Princess of Wales, and we see these hundreds of people who have camped out on the Mall all week, despite the biblical rainfall we have had today, Mark, and we've experienced some of that, but nonetheless, I think it's probably a worse experience being on the Mall. And of course, this is the route which we are going to have the King's procession tomorrow from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey in the Diamond Jubilee state coach.
Yeah, the air-conditioned and hydraulically sprung, which is, relatively good. And then, of course, the big occasion when the Golden State Coach comes back later on the same route.
Absolutely, the same route, Golden State Coach for the Coronation procession. It's famously sprung on leather. The late Queen described it as a horrible ride when she had to ride it for 5 miles around central London. I do understand that the leather has been replaced since 1953.
Didn't they actually find that part of the problem was that the leather straps, which forms the suspension, they were unequal, and therefore it was sort of like a bit of a ship at sea because the leather straps had either shrunk or weren't cut quite the right way. So that explains maybe why the Queen always described being seasick when you were actually travelling in it.
Yes, exactly. It is that suspension, isn't it? And of course we have to remember that the Queen was 27 when she had her coronation, whereas Charles and Camilla both in their 70s. So perhaps for practical reasons they decided to only use the Golden State Coach for the coronation procession rather than for the King's procession, slightly smaller. And, of course, the route is a lot smaller than it was in 1953. Only a couple of miles going down the Mall under Admiralty Arch, Trafalgar Square, down Whitehall towards Westminster Abbey. Whereas for the Queen's procession in 1953, it actually stretched as far as Oxford Street and Regent Street as well. But then we've heard lots, haven't we, Mark, about the security arrangements and how costly that security is.
Well, and I guess just the fact that back in 1953 there wasn't nearly as much traffic in central London as we have now, and we know what the disruption is even here with traffic being blocked. And as we say, we've got a large police presence now here, which may indicate something's about to get underway. But just to reflect on what you were telling us yesterday from the Dog and Duck, this is very much a royal family now wanting to connect and to be seen and to actually engage. I mean, what struck me was the amount of time that both Kate and William took to speak to people. actually interacting and engaging with them.
Absolutely, and how often do you get to see the future King and Queen travel on the London Underground?
On the Elizabeth
Mark?
line,
Yes,
which
on the
we
Elizabeth
share,
line.
of course, to get to work, don't we? Yeah.
Absolutely, and of course it was the line opened by the late Queen, Prince William's grandmother.
May the 17th last year?
Yes, indeed. It doesn't seem that long ago, does it?
No.
But it feels like a lifetime. But yes, the Prince and Princess inside the Dog and Duck, 15 minutes or so. The Prince pulled a pint of a new beer, specifically brewed, yes, for the coronation, called the Kingmaker. He joked that he's better at drinking pints than pouring them, so perhaps that's right. But you're right, they spent a lot of time just meeting as many people as possible who had gathered outside in Soho to greet them. And I think it's a theme we have seen on a number of occasions with the Prince and Princess of Wales. I was in Wales with them last week in Aberfan and the surrounding areas, a community centre they visited. It was pouring down with rain and people had queued for hours in order to catch a glimpse of them. And the Princess of Wales was determined, and the Prince of Wales, to meet every single person, which I think was pretty remarkable. So much so that they totally went over time. And
and as we saw in Soho as well, people want the photos now. They want the selfies. So all that time and you know, doing the pose and so on. But they seem, you know, very happy to do it.
Absolutely, and that struck me as weird, actually, over the last years. There seems to be a lot more selfie-taking initiatives, because if you remember Meghan, just before, on their first engagements, Meghan and Harry, as a newly engaged royal couple, so before they were married in Nottingham, that she actually told somebody in the crowd who asked for a selfie, "Oh, I'm not allowed." So we assumed it was royal protocol that members of the royal family could not pose for selfies.
Maybe it was a Netflix contract, who knows? Well, I'll just sort of interject that. But anyway, we are expecting something to happen here fairly shortly. As we say, the police are in position there. So we'll update you as soon as we get more word on that. Cameron's going to hit his phone and start speaking to some people. Let's speak to someone else who's always in the know as well. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, is outside Westminster Abbey there for us as well. And Mark, we hadn't quite realised that what you were witnessing earlier today seemed to be like a full dress rehearsal. Maybe a lot of them were wearing robes.
Yes, I mean, they obviously want to get it absolutely right, because they know that tomorrow this is a world event of huge importance. People all around the world will be glued to their screens to watch this as well. So the King came, first of all, of course, with the Queen Consort, and then about 20-30 minutes after that, we had the Prince of Wales arriving here as well for that rehearsal. It lasted about an hour or so before they departed back to Buckingham Palace for this lunch. And you're right to say, Mark, that he has got an incredibly busy schedule, despite, of course, perhaps wanting to end things at a certain point to ensure that everyone is suitably rested for that huge occasion tomorrow. But it seems, you know, I won't say there is no rest for the wicked. I hate to describe our monarch as that, but he is going to be a busy man, and it would not surprise me that we get some kind of impromptu event outside Buckingham Palace there, because if we cast our minds back to the very sad occasion after the death of Queen Elizabeth, and then when, of course, the King Charles came down to London on the occasions that he was travelling to his residence in Clarence House, because he's still there at the moment while they are refurbishing Buckingham Palace. That entourage, the vehicle motorcade, stopped on 2 occasions, I seem to remember, and the King got out and greeted the well-wishers for quite some time.
Mark, I'm just going to interrupt you. We've got a lot of activity here. We've actually got the whistles blowing again. We've seen police outriders. We've seen the police vehicles, and we've now got a Bentley SUV coming up. But Cameron, this does look as if this might be a royal party of some description.
It does appear so, Mark. There's been a couple of police escorts coming down the Mall here. I'm just seeing who's in that car. It looks like the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. just coming outside Buckingham Palace, of course, following that lunch for the realm Governor-Generals of the other realms and territories where the King still reigns as head of state. As I said, there's a lot of activity going on at the Mall at the moment. I don't know if we have a live picture of that, but we do know that, of course, many people have been camping out on the Mall for a number of days now, trying to get a prime spot, of course, for the 2 coronation processions.
Yeah, and Paul, our correspondent, is up there, so hopefully he can update us. But again, whistles blowing, more cars coming out. I'm just looking at the timing. I mean, we've got this event with the Commonwealth Heads of Government at 2 o'clock, which is Marlborough House, which is round the corner at the back of it here, but pretty close to the Mall.
Very close to the Mall indeed. He is expected, just the King is expected to attend that Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Of course, the King is the head of the Commonwealth. It was the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in 2014, I believe it was, where he was voted in as the next head of the Commonwealth upon the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Because it is in their gift, of course. It's not necessarily automatic that they have to agree to it.
It's not automatic that Prince William is going to be the next head of the Commonwealth after his father. We'll have to wait and see. But of course, the Commonwealth is a lot different than it was during the days of the British Empire. It's described as a family of nations, 56 family of nations, some of which were never actually part of the British Empire now. And it's all about shared and common interests when it comes to sustainability, the rule of law and democracy.
Yet more vehicles now going down the other way. You were saying that we think there may have been an informal lunch for people to gather in between these various occasions. As much as anything is informal, of course, in Buckingham Palace.
Yes, absolutely. So there was a informal lunch attended by the King, Queen Consort and other members of the royal family, working members, it was very specific, of the royal family, attended by the Governor-Generals of the 14 other realms and territories where the King reigns as head of state, and a few of those prime ministers. We know that Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, met Rishi Sunak this morning in number 10 Downing Street as part of a number of bilateral talks which is happening between government ministers in the United Kingdom and indeed heads of state or government leaders, world leaders who have come to London for the coronation.
And then, of course, we saw another huge motorcade pass behind us with lots of American vehicles.
Yes.
And this was Jill Biden, the President's wife, heading to number 10 to be met by the Prime Minister's wife. Still a little bit of soft power, though more soft than others, in terms of that sort of hands across the ocean, if you were.
Absolutely. So we had Jill Biden, as you said, meeting the Prime Minister's wife in Downing Street, and it's all building up to, let's say, the climax, as it were, of this big diplomatic reception that's being held in Buckingham Palace this evening for all the heads of state and indeed
we've got some more Range Rovers coming now with the police escort, so clearly we know or think lunch is over, but of course it's where people are heading and what they're going to be doing now in these next few minutes. Just on that thing about President Biden, though, we had Mr. President Donald Trump indicating that Biden was disrespectful by not being here. Has there been any reaction behind the scenes with palace officials about the fact that the US president is not here?
Well, the difference between guests who are members of the aristocracy or members of the family and foreign heads of state or whoever who have come across for the coronation is that the foreign invitations are extended on advice from the government and indeed the Foreign Office. So it's actually James Cleverly and his team who decide which heads of state get an invite or not. So it would have very much been this idea of the power of soft diplomacy in action, but Buckingham Palace would have extended invitations on advice from the Foreign Office and the government. So in terms of a reaction from Buckingham Palace as to who or who isn't attending, I doubt we're going to get one, because after all they act on advice of the government.
Yeah, okay, but certainly we've got Jill Biden having been met by the Prime Minister's wife and umbrella at the ready. Just to look forward to tomorrow, I guess it is going to be a very full agenda in terms of who has to be where and when. Might we get walkabouts tomorrow? I mean, is there any slack in the system that could allow that to happen?
I very much doubt we're going to get a walkabout tomorrow. I think London is going to be packed. Clearly we have 2 very high security operations in terms of the King's procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey and Westminster Abbey back to Buckingham Palace. And it's a very tight schedule in terms of the coronation service itself inside the Abbey. the processions and, of course, the balcony appearances and the flypast and the royal salutes happening in the garden.
And they've all got to run to the clock and so on. And I suppose the other thing is they've got their full regalia as they leave Westminster Abbey with the crowns and so on. It's not going to be easy to move about with all that.
No, it certainly won't be. But of course, we've got a whole weekend, haven't we, of celebrations. So with the Coronation big lunches, which are going to be happening on Sunday before the concert at Windsor Castle later that evening, we are expecting members of the royal family to mingle with those invited guests to those big lunches. And then, of course, we've got the big help out as well on the Monday, the charity initiative.
We're just getting some pictures there on the Mall, and clearly we've got a lot of police there on standby, including those on the mounted brigade, the bikes, the pedal bikes, of course, which they've been employing as well rather than the motorbikes. So indications perhaps that something might be happening, or whether it just is perhaps the King heading to Marlborough House for this meeting. We don't know.
Well, we're not quite sure, are we? The gates of Buckingham Palace are certainly still open, and I can certainly see cars still in the foreground. But as you say, Mark, that it looks like from the pictures we're seeing on our screens now, there is a lot of activity on the Mall, with a number of police officers there, which have not been there all day. There is a high security presence here on the Mall. Clearly there's a lot of people camped out overnight. There were police searching tents this morning, just as standard security checks. But this is a lot more than we would be expecting for an ordinary afternoon just before the coronation.
And the fact that Sparky, the Met police sniffer dog, was here as well, going through our various positions here. So an indication perhaps that there was a security operation underway. But I assume that if it is the King, he will be in that Bentley, the royal sort of magenta purple coloured Bentley, rather than one of these 4x4s that we've seen going up and down in the last few minutes.
Absolutely, I would suggest so, because you would think the rehearsals which have happened in Westminster Abbey, they would want to keep relatively secret. So if the King didn't want to be seen for that, you would assume that he would be travelling in a blacked out Range Rover or another kind of car. What we do have, what we have seen this week, is the King travelling in his Bentley with the big open windows where members of the public can see
Designed to be seen, I think there's a glass roof as well on it, as I seem to remember, or one of them anyway.
Yes, I believe there is. So I think if the King is travelling anywhere, we would very much see him in that Bentley. The Prince and Princess of Wales have been known to travel in those kind of big Range Rovers or other cars as well. Tomorrow, of course, they're all going to be travelling in carriages, as we understand it. We've spoken about the Diamond Jubilee coach for the journey from Buckingham Palace to the Abbey, Golden State coach coming back. But the Prince and Princess of Wales, their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, also expected to be travelling in carriages, but of course it has not been confirmed by Buckingham Palace.
Yes, so horsepower of a different nature tomorrow. Literally, it's up to the. And let's remember, I think the Diamond Jubilee coach is 3 tons. The Golden State coach is 4 tons. Huge weight for these horses to travel, even though this distance is half at least of what it was in 1953.
Yes, it appears they've also factored in more time for the Golden State coach to travel back to Buckingham Palace as opposed to the King's procession from the One Direction, because of course the Golden State coach is so heavy and the horses can only travel at walking speed. The King has just left Buckingham Palace.
Yes, we can see the royal Bentley now with the royal standard there on the roof, so that indicates obviously the King is on board. Alongside the police outriders and the various Range Rovers following the police. Whether we can see Camilla as well, who is still...
It looks like the King...
we'll give the King a wave as he passes from the GBNews position.
The King and his private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, were in the car there.
And I think that the Prince and Princess of Wales behind in one of those Range Rovers. So I think you're about to have a bit of excitement up there on the Mall as that heads up there. Hopefully our cameras can pick up there, because let's reflect, Cameron, a lot of people have been waiting. We can hear the cheers from where we are now. They've been camping out for a few days in, well, pretty testing conditions, and there we are. There's the Bentley stopping.
It appears the Bentley has stopped. It appears the King is about to get out of the car on the Mall to greet the hundreds. The King has got out of the car on the Mall, perhaps to greet the thousands of people now who have gathered on the Mall who've been staying overnight in tents, trying to bag a prime position for the coronation processions tomorrow. And perhaps this is the King's idea to say a thank you to them, a personal thank you to them, physically meeting them on the Mall. So
and just by our camera there, clearly the security very tight in terms of them looking into the crowd just to check everything's okay, but no hesitation there from the King in terms of wanting to cross the road and go and shake hands and speak to people. And there we are, the phone's out, all ready to get the shot.
Absolutely, and we have seen the King, we know, wants to be a very personable king. He has made a number of walkabouts on various engagements he has been to since ascending to the throne, Mark. In fact, just the day after he became king, he was, when the car arrived back at Buckingham Palace, having him travelled from Scotland, he got out the car and greeted the crowds who were there.
No, we're not.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Are you going to be around tomorrow?
Yeah, we're very excited.
Too wet.
Oh, a little bit.
Well, we can hear there the giggles, people clearly delighted at this. And I guess when we look at various polls that the newspapers publish about the popularity of the monarchy and whether Charles is going to be a good king, I mean, this is the real proof of the pudding, is when actually, he's met face to face and large smiles, laughter and delight from people.
Absolutely, and I have just heard, Mark, I have had it confirmed that the Prince and Princess of Wales are also joining the King on the Mall to greet members of the crowd. We can't obviously see, I'm afraid, from those pictures. As soon as we do have pictures of them, we'll bring it to you.
Got a nice shot of the tree there.
Yes,
but
the crowds.
we're going to stick with these pictures because clearly it's getting a bit of a crush there. Forgive us, but we're going to stay with this to try and see who we can see. But I think maybe our cameraman's lost his position a little bit there.
Is he even stood up? Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, as you say, perhaps they're going to be the other side, because these are quite well choreographed. One party takes one side and then the other go to the other side.
Yes, we certainly saw that yesterday, actually, Mark, when the Prince and Princess of Wales were doing a similar walkabout in Soho. The Prince of Wales was one side, Princess Catherine was the other side, so as many people as possible could meet at least one royal. And of course it saves time, doesn't it, if everybody gets to see one royal rather than all three of them darting across the very wide Mall, actually.
Yeah.
How wide is it? Do we know, 20 metres or something?
Yeah, and of course we've got barriers as well, even though people have been allowed to walk freely earlier. As you can see, barriers to actually keep people back, because I guess the other thing is that quite a few of these motorcades have been coming through at some speed as well, so there's the road safety aspect to it.
They certainly have. I suspect the motorcades which travelled before the King left Buckingham Palace were those Governor-Generals and indeed foreign Prime Ministers who had come for that informal lunch at Buckingham Palace. No doubt they will be back at Buckingham Palace this evening for the reception. But yes, we've got the King and the Prince and Princess of Wales surprising the crowds on the Mall who have waited hours, if not days, to catch a glimpse.
And I'm just looking now, it's gone 2 o'clock. They are due at this Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, but I just wonder if maybe he's going to approach there on foot. How far would that be to walk to Marlborough House? I mean, you can just turn left here, basically up the Mall, can't you?
You can, but of course, if he's not just walking and he's shaking hands with lots of different people, it could take some time. It is just the King expected to attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting inside Marlborough House a bit later on this afternoon. The Prince and Princess of Wales are not, as we understand it, so perhaps they will spend more time meeting members of the public. As I said, there's many people there to meet, and they do enjoy meeting members of the public.
We're just seeing a bit of shouting. We certainly haven't seen any protest banners or the sort of Republic group who said, I think, we're going to concentrate on Trafalgar Square in terms of their official demonstration. But as yet, we haven't seen any kind of that organised protest that we saw, well, you saw at least and witnessed up at York Minster that time.
No, we haven't. There have been, for the King at least, for the planned engagements where the public know where he is going to be, usually in a big city. The Republican protest, Not My King, the big yellow banners come out in force. They have always been peaceful, but they've always been very noisy, and that is exactly what I'm afraid we are expecting tomorrow for those monarchists out on the Mall. But we are expecting they want at least 1,000 people to be in Trafalgar Square protesting. It is, of course, their right to protest, and they have been in discussions, as we understand it, with the police, and the Metropolitan Police see no issue with them carrying out a peaceful protest. And as I said, they very much do promise to be peaceful, but indeed noisy, to make sure that their voices are heard.
And the police also saying they will allow placards to be displayed, even if they are anti-royal messages of whatever nature. But clearly they are also indicating that this sort of level of intervention, the difficulties in terms of deciding when everyone is a threat and there may be some kind of physical intervention, they're not going to take chances on that.
They absolutely are not. The Metropolitan Police say they are going to have a very low threshold.
Yeah, that's the phrase, that's right.
When it comes to any kind of disorder on the day of the coronation.
And this is under the Public Order Act, which is a new piece of legislation.
Yes, it certainly is, and we saw Just Stop Oil, a number of Just Stop Oil protesters earlier this week, handcuffed and arrested for a protest they were carrying out. I believe it was Parliament Square, if I'm not much mistaken.
A slow march. Yeah.
And we have seen reports over the last couple of weeks, I think it was the Mail on Sunday last week or the week before, suggesting that perhaps there is a plot to throw rape alarms at the horses to try and spook the horses.
Because these are very high-pitched.
Yeah, very high-pitched noises to try and spook the horses which are pulling the carriages, which clearly can become very dangerous. So it's those type of protests which the police are going to have a very low threshold for, the ones which are disruptive and potentially dangerous.
The other aspect, however, is when we see the numbers here who, as you say, have been in the Mall for, well, a few days now, is what the reaction may be of those royalists supporting the royal family in terms of any protests. I mean, that could itself separately provide a flashpoint.
It certainly could, and I think there will be a number of police on duty. There are a number of police on duty on coronation weekends. They will know where the Republic protests are going to be, and I'm sure there is a plan to make sure there's no clashes between pro-monarchy and anti-monarchy supporters.
Well, let's just update you on what we've got here on GB News Live. This is the picture of the crowd here along the Mall, and we have had the King arriving in the Royal Bentley in the last few minutes, and he's got out of the car to greet the crowds. We think that the Prince and Princess of Wales may be there as well. Our cameras can't quite catch up with that, but certainly there was quite a bit of excitement there when that Royal Bentley pulled up, and certainly for all these people who've been camped out and braved, well, torrential downpour earlier, and lightning and thunder, the whole gamut. They have had their reward with a glimpse and maybe a word with the King as well. And plenty of Union Jacks and flags on display as well. It's interesting that when Paul, certainly our reporter, was speaking to people earlier, well, he's got the face mask, or the face paint, I should say, as well. A lot of these are veterans of previous occasions, such as the Diamond Jubilee and so on. They're quite well rehearsed in this.
Yes, they certainly are. I was walking up and down the Mall a little bit earlier and speaking to people who had gathered, and some of them have queued and camped on the Mall for a number of royal occasions, including the wedding of the then Kate Middleton and Prince William, now the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Diamond Jubilee, the Platinum Jubilee as well, and of course, very sadly, they queued for a number of hours to pay their respects to the late Queen lying in state last September. But there certainly seems to be a growing, I want to, for want of a better phrase, a cult, if you like, of dedicated royal fans who come to central London for these big royal occasions. Many of them British, many of them Welsh, a few Northern Irish and Scottish as well, but a number of international royal fans as well, particularly from the United States of America.
Huge number that have been walking around. Doesn't seem as tourists, but they are here for the occasion. And one wonders whether the late Queen's passing has changed people's assessment, where they've recognised that this is something that's very inherent within the British way of life, and want to be part of it and to celebrate it. And therefore we've got all the preparations over this weekend for the street parties and villages being directly involved, and towns and so on. Going back to, and I remember it, 1977, I think it was the Silver Jubilee, which was the first major occasion when this sort of thing happened.
Absolutely, and I was speaking to somebody a few days ago who actually remembers the wedding of Diana Spencer and the then Prince Charles in 1981, and and they were saying that the security for the coronation is nothing like she has seen before. She has covered many events from a position like this, and there is certainly a lot of tight security here.
Well, as we can see, you can see the police in their yellow jackets. They've got their eyes firmly on the crowd, their backs to the mall itself, and just scanning people there. We've seen the police outriders, of course, and the special branch police as well, armed police. Let's bring in Mark White, our Home Affairs editor, who's down at Westminster Abbey, of course, who was, I think you were a couple of days ago in that gold control operations room, Mark, which gave you a sort of behind-the-scenes look at the various surveillance cameras they had and the CCTV and all the preparations for not just today but tomorrow in particular.
Yes, in that control room, which is just on the other side of the River Thames, not too far from Scotland Yard itself, is manned by Metropolitan Police officers, other members of the emergency services, military personnel and the security services, bringing them all together really to coordinate, which is what is a very significant operation. And what we're seeing here really is a carbon copy of what we saw back in September of last year after the death of Her Majesty the Queen, when then King Charles travelled down to London, and on a couple of occasions as he left Buckingham Palace, he headed a short distance up the Mall, got out of the vehicle and did what we're seeing here, the handshakes and greeting the crowd and speaking to them. This is by the very nature of leaving the secure environment of the vehicle and the motorcade, coming out and coming face to face with the public, the most high-risk element of what we're seeing here. But it's something that the Royals are used to, and that Royal Protection and the wider security operation is well used to. The Royal Protection teams, in conjunction with those uniformed Metropolitan Police officers, have been scoping out this area around the Mall for some time. And just even the uniformed officers who are there, you were talking about them, Mark, facing the crowd. Absolutely, that's what they do. And they get chatting to the crowd. And they are able, through their own experience, to be able to tell, the real royal fans who are here, people that might be out of place, that are perhaps not paying too much attention to what is going on. And, that kind of, all of that intelligence feeds in to be able to give them some kind of an assessment of what they might be walking into, quite literally. So there is, yes, a heightened element of risk with the walkabout, but it's done, so professionally. And the King, of course, other members of the royal family, we know the Prince and Princess of Wales were there just now as well, absolutely see this as a vital component in the way that they can interact with the people of the United Kingdom, and of course from further afield who've come here as well. It's all about accessibility.
Yeah. And just another aspect just to point out, people may find it quite comical, but we've seen these pictures of these police on mountain bikes as well, like the sort of Met Mounted Brigade. Now, what's the story behind that? Is it that actually it's easier for them to get in and out and get access by just literally pedaling their bike up and down the Mall?
Yep, 100% correct. And you don't just see it in this country. I mean, if you look to America, they are on a lot of the big sort of occasions where there are significant numbers of people in crowds, you'll find officers on bikes because they can zip on a bike and they can very quickly shoot down the pavement or to the other side of the road, wherever they need to be on these bikes. I mean, they are just police officers, but with that added extra element of being able to probably get to a location a bit faster than someone having to leg it on foot, if you like. Not always are these kind of areas accessible to vehicles, so a smaller but quickly mobile version such as a push bike is often the order of the day. So that's what you're seeing here. I should say where we are at Westminster Abbey, just like you down there at Buckingham Palace, Mark, we've been seeing throughout the day these motorcades coming backward and forward, of course, members of the royal family, but some of these heads of state now and other dignitaries, Commonwealth, high commissioners and the like. We know that Joe Biden, the US First Lady, is in town and has been to Downing Street, along with the Australian and New Zealand Prime Ministers. And all of these motorcades have to be escorted, quite heavy security to where they go, because they have very important people on board. And to a security anorak like me, it's really quite interesting to watch, because normally in the capital, when you see the royals going about, they're escorted by the white motorcycles of the Metropolitan Police Special Escort Group with the whistles. Well, clearly there's not enough of these motorcycle escort teams to deal with the more than 100 heads of state who require to be escorted around the capital. So what you've got are traffic motorcycle police officers from Norfolk, Suffolk, Merseyside, Manchester, all over the country who've come into the capital, and the Met have very kindly told them not to use their sirens, because that's going to offend the locals, clearly. And they've given them these almost like referees' whistles that they use, the special escort group. So you're seeing them going around, you're hearing whistles all the time. It's just a bit more polite, but it gets people's attention nonetheless.
Yeah, like Dixon of Dock Green, the old police whistle. But it certainly has worked. We've been hearing them down here at Buckingham Palace, and of course as the various motorcades have been out and about. But I'm just looking at the timing. I mean, I think the King was due to be at Marlborough House by now for the Commonwealth heads of government, but obviously they will have to wait for his subjects, because he's clearly wanting to meet and greet as many people as possible. And let's reflect that, these crowds have been out there, as we see more police outriders there come across the shot, have been out for quite a few days, and they've even been braving this torrential downpour a little earlier. Thank goodness, that the King didn't have to get his raincoat and brolly ready.
Yeah, I mean, you've really got to feel for them, haven't you? They are on the Mall. They have been there all week, some of them. And the weather's been not too bad. It's been relatively light rain, but absolutely torrential, these couple of showers that we've had already today, and the potential for more, of course. Great at the moment, it's nice and sunny again, you can quickly dry out, but pretty miserable if you're in these tents. And I think they will be lifted absolutely by the sight of the monarch and by the Prince and Princess of Wales, just taking that time in what is a phenomenally busy schedule over the coming day and a half now, just to come and to greet them and to speak with them and to find out where they've come from and why they wanted to make that pilgrimage down to central London.
Mark, thank you for that. We'll stay with these pictures. As you say, the weather a little kinder. But let me now welcome to our GB News Buckingham Palace studio, if we can call it that, Jenny Bond. Very warm welcome to you. Great to see you once more, a veteran of many of these occasions. And I was reading about your time with Prince Charles as he was then at Highgrove, when he was commenting on your white stilettos. And I'm very glad to see that you've also graced us today with your trademark from all those royal tours of many years ago.
Well, I thought I'd get them out again. It's been a while. I sort of went off them for a few years, but I thought...
back in fashion now.
There they are. There.
Yeah, but you wrote and spoke with great well, it was sort of looking back at the formation of this new king and the travails and all the difficulties he's gone through, and I think you were giving him a 10 out of 10 for where he's got to and who he is now.
Yeah, pretty much. Like he's human. He has his faults, not least of all his rather short temper. But
some of them which he acknowledges himself, of course.
Yes, he does. He does. And I think Camilla keeps him in check now. She can tell him, when he's behaving
Just
slightly
seen some
silly.
pictures there of William, the Prince of Wales, now further up the Mall.
Yeah, he's rocking it out there, isn't he? He really is. And Catherine's meant to be there, but I haven't actually seen her. But the reports are she's there as well. I don't know.
And isn't it interesting in terms of the message for the future that this is, should we say, combined operation? going on today.
Yes, it is. I mean, they're quite a good double act these days, Charles and William. And, you know, tomorrow we're going to see William declare that he is his liege man, swear his allegiance to his father. I think it'll be a very moving moment, you know. I was reading how it was Edward VII back in 1902 who couldn't help himself when the future George V, his son, did the same, kissed him gently on the cheek and paid his allegiance. And he just got off the throne and gave him a great big cuddle.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice to see tomorrow?
Yeah, and still the questions, of course, as to the missing brother, if you like. We still don't know the seating position for the Abbey. We still don't know the makeup for the behind us on the balcony there at Buckingham Palace. Although we are being told it'll be working royals. I mean, it might be a bit of a bittersweet occasion for the family tomorrow.
Which is why I think that Harry is not going to hang around. I mean, there are rumours sweeping that he is already here. I don't know if that is true or not, but I think that as soon as the service is over tomorrow, which will be about 1 o'clock, he will head off back to the airport. And you know, it's not inconceivable on the time frame. He will get there in time in California to say goodnight to his birthday boy.
Yes, because I mean, obviously, family occasion for him. Archie was 4 years old, I think. So, yeah, very important birthday.
It is. I've got a lot of time for that. I remember when I was with Charles and Diana on that historic tour in 1992, going back, as you say, a veteran of this.
Well, it wasn't that long ago.
She stood in front of the Taj Mahal, and it was a very newsy event. And I wanted to go back for my 2-year-old's birthday, and I bust a gut and went halfway around the world in order to walk through that door on her birthday. And I think that's
what you made it?
I did. And I think that's what Harry has in his mind. And maybe wrong, but I think there's not a lot for him to be here for. It's going to be #awkward. In any case.
Because whatever he does, whatever he says, is going to be interpreted in whatever way the papers want to interpret it. I guess that's the.
There's going to be no time tomorrow or the next day, really, for a little sit-down chat, and it's going to be more than a chat. They need a long, serious discussion to try and mend that rift.
Yeah. Where is the king at the moment? Is he in a good place, do you think?
I think he is. I think, in all honesty, today he will be just thinking 24 hours and it'll be over.
Well, Jude, this is the interesting that we've been discussing with Alistair and others. You know, we were told originally that he wanted a 6 o'clock curfew, a deadline tonight. Nothing then after that, so I can actually, you know, rest and recuperate and prepare for the big day. But, you know, this schedule is still absolutely packed, and he's got, you know, all these duties to perform this evening as well, we now understand.
I know it's a heck of a lot for a 74-year-old to have to do, and Camilla as well, 75. But, I mean, basically, they're going to be knackered by the time they get to the Abbey, aren't they? They are.
And I think Camilla, who's still Queen Consort, of course, until tomorrow, say, you know, I'm trying to get him to slow up, but there's just no chance of that happening.
No, he is a workaholic, and I think that's just going to continue. It's this whole Queen and Queen Consort thing. It's really got people exercised, hasn't it? But my understanding of it is that there's no change in status. It's just really shorthand. I mean, Queen Alexandra was Queen Consort, Queen Mary was Queen Consort, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, Queen Consort, but we called them Queen.
But yeah, I was going to say, from tomorrow, though, when obviously she will have a crown on her head as well, is that when we start calling her Queen Camilla?
I think it's just been a convenient point at which the palace have said, oh, by the way, it's Queen Camilla, just like I might say it's Jen, actually, you know?
Yeah, not Queen Jen. Not yet, no. But again, you know, talking about double acts and so on, it does appear that he is a lot more relaxed in himself as a result of being this couple, and the fact that he can now approach the public as this royal couple without all that weight that he had on his shoulders.
He's going to have quite a weight on his shoulders tomorrow,
well,
actually.
Yeah.
You know how much those cloaks weigh? Yes.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And I think that's one reason why our late Queen stepped in and made it clear that she wanted Camilla to be the Queen. Because she knew just how important it was to have someone who understood you at your side, someone to have a laugh with, to kick your shoes up at the end of the day and say, oh, gosh, that was awful, wasn't it? And that was Philip for her.
And because she recognised that perhaps Camilla was on Charles's wavelength in terms of, you know, the parallels being drawn, that perhaps the problem with Diana and Charles were they were not soulmates in that respect that Camilla and Charles are.
Yeah, I mean, she is his soulmate. She is his companion. She knows how to handle him. But I knew and liked Diana. Maybe you did too. I really, really got on with her. But that doesn't mean that I cannot know and like Camilla. She's a wonderful woman. And as many people have said recently, I think it's true that what you see is what you get. She has no airs and graces. And she loves her man, and she puts herself in his shadow very often in the way that it wasn't Diana's fault, but she overshadowed him.
But we'll also make sure that he's in the right place tonight and tomorrow in terms of preparing for that big day, because we saw the problem with the pen, of course, St James's Palace, when things didn't quite work. As you say, he has got a bit of a short fuse for some things.
He does, and I think these rehearsals have been really quite troubled.
Really? Is that why we've had a second rehearsal today, do you think?
I don't know whether that was scheduled, but I think, there's been quite a lot of hiccups. The ramp has been built as a precaution because, as I was saying, the regalia that he'll be carrying and wearing is heavy and difficult, and it's easy to stumble.
He's in his 70s without being unkind about it.
He is.
And of course he's got a bad back, I think, which was one of those polo accidents when, he was sort of in Windsor and Midhurst and
he always travels with a cushion at the back in the
and
car.
a brace as well.
So
and in terms of what we will see tomorrow, a walkabout probably is not going to be on the cards, but he will want to be seen in terms of all the people here in London and, of course, around the world. This is an occasion that he will want to share.
Absolutely, and I think that's why he's done the walkabout, quite an extended walkabout this afternoon, because it is about the people, and they've been through quite a lot of rain and stuff already, so he wanted to thank them, and this was the opportunity to do it. He can't jump out of the state coach tomorrow and say hello.
Hands,
no.
Especially with that crown on his head and so on, Well, indeed, we've been seeing these pictures, of course, of the crowds who've been waiting very patiently along the Mall. They've been camping out, many of them, for days to get that sight of the King and maybe other members of the royal family, or even have a word with them. Well, let me tell you now, royal exclusive, our very own Patrick Chris has got to shake hands with someone and ask him how he was feeling ahead of a big day. This is what happened a little earlier.
Good luck for tomorrow.
It's not mine, it's one of the soldiers.
Oh, they're used to it.
Well, they are roughing it a little bit. So.
Didn't all get too wet, I hope.
Not too wet. Are you nervous for tomorrow?
Are you still sick?
I am soldiers
It's a great joy to see you again. And I hope the Lord
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
It's a bit late for me, isn't it?
Well, I'm glad to say that Patrick is not in the tower and can join us here in the GB News studio, because clearly, the word used to be, if you're a member of the press, you don't actually sort of listen in or ask questions, but perhaps he thought you were just one of those royal supporters.
I blend in with the commoners rather well,
exactly.
Mark, and that's always been my shtick, to be honest with you. But no, it was fabulous. Look, so he got out of it. He got out of his car and he was walking around. So many people, spontaneous "God Save the King" and 3 cheers for the King. And just as luck would have it, he comes right past me, and I thought I'll chance it, and reached over, and then I thought, well, my boss would kill me if I didn't ask him a question. So I thought, are you nervous for tomorrow? And he just kind of went, "Wow, well," and walked off. So yeah.
But a big smile
That was the
on
quote,
his
was
face.
it? That was the quote.
Well.
The impression's not that great, is it? Anyway, but a big smile on his face, clearly more than happy to meet people and to learn where they've come from and how long they've been waiting and so on.
Absolutely. He was asking everybody where they'd come from. Obviously, as you can imagine, a lot of people had met him before over the years in a variety of different settings. He was asking them about that. Very grateful for it. I must say, he looks rather well, actually. He looks in really fine fettle. And he was just happy to be engaged. A little bit to the irritation, I think, of his minders, who were trying to move him on quickly.
Well, yeah, because he had to be at the heads of Commonwealth heads of government meeting at 2 o'clock, so he was running a bit late. Maybe we can blame you for that.
Pin it all on me. Pin it all on me. But no, he was taking a lot of time. time mixing with absolutely everybody and just chatting about how they feel for the day and things. But I must say, he was much more willing, as you can understand, to spend a lot longer talking to people who didn't have a camera in his face.
Quite rightly. But let's just ask you, Jenny, I mean, it wasn't the done thing, if you're a member of the press pack, to actually ask a question or put the microphone forward, was it?
No, I got in a lot of trouble because, like you think you're so close, you've got to say something, haven't you? And actually, I always found Charles played along quite well. Others,
he's got a sense of humour, isn't he?
Oh gosh, yeah, he really has.
Yeah.
The Queen was less willing to talk. I remember it being at Poundbury, and she'd looked around Poundbury, which was the town that he built, he designed, if you like. And I waited and looked all around, and I thought, now's my moment. And I said to the Queen, "Ma'am, could I ask what you think of your son's work?" And she just looked at me and off she went.
off to the tower. Yeah.
So that didn't work.
And Patrick, we have to ask you, I mean, what was the response of everyone there? I mean, people literally have been there for days now waiting, and they've got their big moment, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the rumbling initially went around the crowd that it might be Will and Kate.
Yeah.
And everyone was obviously excited about that. And then the car pulled up, and it just emerged it was King Charles, and then he stopped, about halfway up the Mall there by the Jamaica flag and the Australian flags, and everyone was like, oh gosh, what's going to happen here? And then the door opened, and
he walked straight across.
He sprung out, and he's straight across, and he actually walked back past his car, so behind it, close towards Buckingham Palace, so he could do a longer tour of the crowd, which obviously is really nice for everybody who was there. But he was there for 20 minutes, half an hour, easily.
And William was there too.
William was there. Well, look, I was, as you can imagine,
you were running around.
I was so busy watching the King through my own phone, like a classic millennial, that I didn't notice Will's. But yes, there you go.
But as you were saying, and we can see the Royal Protection Officer there with his talking into his mouthpiece, maybe. I mean, clearly they're thinking, come on, let's move on, let's get out of here, because obviously the security operation is really, really tight.
Yeah, absolutely. The helicopter was in the air, and there were a lot of drive-bys first. So we saw a lot of drive-bys of cars that looked as though they might have a royal in it, and then of course the actual proper royal car comes past. But so there was a few kind of recce's, as it were, going around the block. The excitement was building. Then we could just about see the gates of Buckingham Palace open up, and the proper royal car comes out, and he stops there. But yeah, I mean, I must say he wasn't mobbed by security at all. There were a couple of kind of press managers, as it were. So he's obviously very, very
just keeping a cautious eye. Now we reflect that maybe these people who are in position, they're going to stay there until tomorrow because they've got prime position for the two processions going to the Abbey and back.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, those people are not moving. Can I just say as well, I've been up and down that mile, every day this week. It is a completely different animal there today.
Oh, really?
The volume of people, it's 5, 6, 7, 8 times as many people. The excitement is absolutely incredible. The buzz of the place is just amazing. But also, can I just say quickly how polite everybody was, because there's clearly like a mad scrum to go and try and see the King, and everyone was very British about it.
What, queuing?
Someone even let me in. Someone goes, "Oh, well, after you." I even said to him, "Are you sure?" Yeah.
Which obviously would have puzzled the Americans, maybe. And there are a lot of Americans around, I certainly know. So walk down through Green Park, and they really are sharing in this occasion, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The American flags are flying high, over there. There really is. And there's a good Commonwealth feel as well, not just because of the flags on the Mall, but there's really big Commonwealth representation right across there, which I think bodes well going forward.
Yeah, and again, this emphasis on the Commonwealth and the heads of government meeting that's going on at the moment. I mean, many of your royal tours were connected with the Commonwealth. I mean, really at the heart of the modern monarchy now.
They were, but I think this is a tricky area, as we know, for the royals ahead.
Well, because of the empire and all the echoes.
Yes,
of that,
and they don't really want to have their head of state. I find it I've just spent a couple of months in Antigua, actually, and I find it very, very odd to think that he is the king of Antigua. It doesn't sound, as you're sitting on the beach, it doesn't seem to work. And personally, I think it's ludicrous that he's the head of state of Australia or Canada. And I think we are going to see new referenda, and we are probably going to see these countries
for full
move
republics,
away. Yes.
Really?
Probably still part of the Commonwealth.
Yes.
But not
with
the head of
nations,
state. Well, it is a silly idea, isn't it, having your head of state thousands of miles away.
Oh, you heard that here first on GB News. Well, that's your controversy for later on, Patrick. I'll leave that to you. Anyway, thank you for bringing us that exclusive.
No, thank you.
And good that you're not in the tower. Let's get an update, though, all the other news headlines, because Rhiannon's waiting for us.
Thank you, Mark. It's
2:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom with the main stories. Ahead of tomorrow's coronation, the King and the Prince and Princess of Wales greeted well-wishers on the Mall. King Charles is due to welcome international dignitaries to Buckingham Palace shortly. That's after hosting a lunch for leaders of countries where he's head of state. This morning saw the final rehearsal for the coronation at Westminster Abbey. World leaders have been arriving at Downing Street ahead of the King's coronation. The latest to be welcomed is Joe Biden's wife, leading the US delegation, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. She was met at Downing Street by Akshata Murthy, the Prime Minister's wife. Earlier, Rishi Sunak welcomed Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and New Zealand's Chris Hipkins. Both are vocal Republicans, but have said they will swear allegiance to the King tomorrow. The Conservatives continue to suffer heavy losses in local elections in England, with Labour and the Liberal Democrats both making gains. The Tories have so far lost control of 17 councils, including Stratford, which has just gone to the Lib Dems. Labour has now gained 6, including East Staffordshire and Swindon. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's acknowledged some disappointing results, but denies there's been a big swing to Labour, while Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey says results are better than expected.
I think these are some of the best local elections ever for the Liberal Democrats, and it looks like lots of people have responded positively to our campaigns, our local candidates, and are really cross with the Conservatives, lifelong Conservatives switching to the Liberal Democrats, and that's on the health service, on the cost of living, on local issues like sewage. And frankly, people are saying they want a general election. They want this Conservative government out.
Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer believes he's now on course to becoming the next Prime Minister.
We've just taken Medway for the first time since 1998. That is a very, very good night for the Labour Party. We didn't just get it over the line, we absolutely smashed it. And it's the same story elsewhere. Same story in Plymouth, in Stoke, up in Middlesbrough, and these are the key battlegrounds as we go into the next election. And make no mistake, this means that we are on course for a Labour majority at the next election.
TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2574 and €1.1451. The price of gold is £1,598.48 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,744 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And welcome back to GB News Live here at Buckingham Palace, where we're seeing a bit of blue sky, a bit of cumulus cloud as well, but certainly it's been breaking up a bit because we had really horrendous conditions earlier. We had a thunderstorm, we had the thunder, we had the lightning, and then the skies opened. But there's a very important reason as to why we're keeping a weather eye out, because of course not just the coronation itself tomorrow in the procession, but the fly past as well. Questions as to whether that will have to be postponed or cancelled because of the weather conditions. The 6-minute fly past, including 60 aircraft, remember, and that's from modern jet aircraft to old World War II piston engine fighters. The forecasters, though, saying conditions in London will be changeable, cloudy and wet tomorrow. It could hamper the pilots and what they're trying to do to fly safely. Let's get the main man in now and speak to meteorologist and forecaster at Met Office, Alex Deacon. Alex, thank you for joining us. All eyes on you, not just from us, but the RAF, the Royal Navy, the Army Air Corps and everyone else. What are you getting from all your pictures there?
Yeah, it's not looking too great in terms of the weather for the big day tomorrow. I think certainly where you are in London, it's going to be pretty drab, pretty cloudy, pretty grey, and there will be some light rain and drizzle on and off. Now, nothing too heavy. It's not going to rain all day. It's not going to be a washout. But certainly if you're there on the Mall, just be prepared for rain and drizzle to come. Just a dull kind of dank day. And hopefully, there are some signs that come the afternoon, it might start to brighten up just a little bit. But overall, it's looking like a fairly grey coronation, certainly in London. It does look a bit brighter further north, something a bit better across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But across much of the south, expect fairly grey skies for the coronation tomorrow. And as I said, some rain and drizzle never too far away.
Yes, because of course, let's reflect that lots of people are preparing their own street parties and parties in the village green and so on. So it's not just here in London. But of course, for the fly past, I guess the important thing is what the cloud base is going to be, how far down the cloud comes, bearing in mind that the safety for flying conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be key. Another thing to consider also is the rain, because any kind of rain really reduces visibility, and that's another issue that that the RAF will have to deal with. And it is, as you say, ultimately an RAF decision. They will have to make the call. And the different aircraft you mentioned there, they all have different criteria about what's safe for them as well. So there will be lots of decisions that have to be made tomorrow. Certainly, the cloud base isn't looking brilliant at the moment. It is going to be fairly low tomorrow morning, but I'm hopeful it might start to lift a little bit in the afternoon. It really is going to be a touch and go and a tough call for the RAF because, yeah, that will be the big decision. Is that cloud base going to be high enough for that fly past? As I said, there is going to be a lot of cloud around. It's just a question of how high up it is.
Right, OK, so a lot of difficult decisions to come. But what about the wind then as well? I mean, we've seen the flags flying here. They're still fluttering. That's the other thing, I guess, that the pilots will have to take into consideration.
Yeah, wind's not too bad, actually. I don't think we'll see too much in the way of problems from the winds. It's quite gusty with you today because we've got the thunderstorms nearby. You said you just had one. So there's some gusty winds around today because there's some really heavy showers around. But equally, there's some sunshine around as well, and it feels pretty warm in the sunshine. So wind's not considered to be an issue, I don't think. It really will be the cloud and the visibility that we're asking questions of. And at the moment, it does look like it's kind of touch and go. Certainly, the morning looks pretty dull and dank. As I said, hopeful that it might get a little brighter, and the cloud bases may lift a touch for the afternoon for the time of the fly past. But at the moment, winds don't look to be a problem. But yeah, if you're on the Mall, if you're going to London, be prepared for damp and drizzly conditions. Nothing too heavy, and it will actually be quite mild, certainly compared to the last coronation. I don't know if you remember that, but it was only 11 degrees in London for Queen Elizabeth's coronation.
Yeah, and I've got the sun on my back now, and actually when it comes out, it's quite warm. And I think they've been talking about maybe 20 degrees tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that will require the sun to come out again, and that looks unlikely. I think kind of 17, 18 is more of a ballpark for the afternoon. But I think the key thing for those people camping, of course, on the Mall overnight tonight, it won't be so cold tonight. The temperatures will hold up quite well overnight, down to about, 12 or 13, so that's not too bad for that morning. So, yeah, obviously if you're standing outside and it's drizzle, it's never going to feel all that particularly warm. But the good news for those people camping out overnight, it won't be a really cold night. It'll be reasonably mild.
OK, and then the last thought, obviously, it's a bank holiday weekend. We've got Sunday and we've got the Monday. What's it looking like then heading a bit further forward?
Well, it's a classic bank holiday hodgepodge, really, giving us headaches all week. But Sunday looks better. Sunday does look drier. Certainly in the west where I am, Sunday looks like being a better day. Wales, Northern Ireland, actually a pretty decent day. Further east, you're going to have to dodge heavy showers again. There will be some fine and sunny weather. So for those street parties on Sunday, again, yeah, reasonably optimistic that Sunday will be a better and a drier day. But certainly in the east, across parts of the southeast, if you've got a street party on Sunday, just have a plan in case you do catch a downpour, because there will be some around. Further west, it looks a bit better. Monday, then, another weather system comes in off the Atlantic, and that's going to bring more cloud and further outbreaks of rain. So it really is one of those classic British bank holiday weekends where the weather's just chopping and changing all the time.
Just make sure that brolly's to hand. Alex, thank you ever so much for taking us through that in such detail. Do appreciate it. We'll just keep everything crossed, OK? No, thank you very much indeed.
Indeed.
Now, let's just bring you breaking news here on GB News Live, just coming in, where we're learning that COVID is no longer a global health emergency. Now, that's coming in from the World Health Organization, the Director General, Tedros Ghebreyesus, declaring that COVID-19 is over as that health emergency, but also saying it does not mean that COVID is over as a health threat. So clearly still concerns, but as a direct emergency, it's being downplayed, which will bring some relief, of course, to health agencies across the globe. More on that, and of course more here from Buckingham Palace as we prepare for that big day, the coronation tomorrow. We'll have the very latest for you. Stay with us.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live here at our royal studio, our Buckingham Palace studio. Not quite in Buckingham Palace, but near enough. And joining us once more, someone who has been inside Buckingham Palace on quite a few occasions, I guess. Jenny Bond is still with us. And we're very grateful that you are with us, because I guess tomorrow you're going to be pretty much in demand. What is your working day tomorrow? When are you starting?
Yeah, I start at 6, Westminster Abbey, and then I'll be at the Abbey for most of the day. Not in it, but overlooking the procession and reporting. And I finish down here at midnight. Yeah.
Oh my goodness me! But you wouldn't miss it.
Of course I wouldn't. You know, I have, as you say, been part of so many of these huge occasions, and I still have the. Well, I enjoy it first of all, but I have a curiosity about this thing, which is the proportion of the community who are passionate about the royal family.
Yes.
I mean, the royal watchers really are a breed on their own, and I love them. I love them to death. They used to cheer me when I arrived and curtsy.
Really?
And bring me presents, and it's one big party. I know what the atmosphere is like down there. You know, you've been cold and wet and freezing, but it's fun. And they have literally got a front row on history.
Yeah, and those that we've been speaking to say that they meet up with friends that they made when they were, for the Platinum Jubilee or even earlier. They come back for the return fixture, if you like.
Oh, they do, and they take pictures of each other, and they take pictures, obviously, of the royals, and several of the royals, particularly the Queen Mother, used to to recognise them, and she would go over to them, and they would then present her with a picture from the last occasion. And she loved it. She knew a lot of them by name, actually, and I think Charles might be the same.
Yeah. The other aspect is the number of foreign tourists or people who have come deliberately here for the coronation, particularly Americans. And I guess they, we are putting the best of Britain on show, all that pomp and circumstance and the procession and the parades and so on. Perhaps we get rather blasé about it. It does really strike a chord with people.
When you watch those rehearsals or watch it for real, I defy anyone, whatever their views about the monarchy, not to have a little thrill, a little shiver when they see the cavalry go by and those gleaming breastplates and the drums drumming and the hooves beating along the path. I think it's an extraordinary sight, and we do it very well.
And the other aspect then, in terms of the coronation itself, and the whole process of the anointing, well, whether we actually do plead allegiance to the king, I don't know. There's obviously a discussion as to whether that's a request from the Archbishop of Canterbury or from Buckingham Palace. However, it is obviously a very solemn moment as well. So that's part of tomorrow.
That, I think, for the king particularly, is at the heart of it. The anointing, really, in the eyes of God, as him as king, and we're told
God-given duty.
Yes, which is, of course, what the Queen always said. It's a God-given duty, and that's why I can't give it up. I have to do it for life. So it's deeply religious ceremony, and he is a very spiritual man. He's also an emotional man who will get very moved by the music.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because clearly we saw the tears at the passing of his father and his mother, and clearly, that will be in his mind tomorrow at some stage. Will he be able to carry that through?
I think he will, yes, but I think we will see that very sombre face that we see sometimes on King Charles. He will probably be lost, deep in thought. And the music may well move him to tears. So much of it's been specially commissioned.
Well, Andrew Lloyd Webber, for instance,
who is a personal friend of his now. It's going to be quite something to watch.
Okay, well, enjoy your day tomorrow, even though it's going to be rather a long one, 6 till midnight. Gosh. Someone else who may be working those sorts of hours, Mark White, our Home Security Editor, joining us now from Westminster Abbey with the latest there, because it's interesting, Mark, we're now learning that what you were witnessing earlier seems to have been almost like a full dress rehearsal once more, the second of the week.
Yeah, and really the last chance to try to iron out any of these little issues. And as I think Jenny was alluding to, there has probably been 1 or 2 little hitches that they will hopefully get right on the day, because it is going to be viewed by many millions of people in this country, but right around the world as well. You were talking about the tourists who come here, and many of them will have come from America, further afield, arriving here and seeing this kind of activity, probably thinking this is exactly what you should see when you're in London. This is what I see on the television. But listen, anybody that lives and works in London will tell you that these are, not everyday occurrences. But when we do them, we do as a nation them very well indeed, unrivaled, I would say, around the world. And the procession that's going to take place, of course, from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey will in itself be, very special, but only 200 members of the military following the Diamond Jubilee coach on the way up. There will be a military band as well. But it's this procession after the King has been crowned, returning on this route of 1.42 miles, leaving here at Westminster Abbey, going up to around Parliament Square, up Whitehall to Trafalgar Square, and then down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. That will be truly spectacular. There will be 4,000 members of the military taking part in that. 19 military bands interspersed throughout that procession as well. So much for people to see that won't just be over in a flash. That's going to be a good half hour or so before the length of that procession passes them.
Yeah, because clearly that coach can only be pulled at the speed the horses can go at, and that may give people a good look at the King, as we of course see the pictures earlier from the Mall. But just with your defence hat on, Mark, what do we think the process is on the fly pass and when that decision may be made? Because clearly one of the difficulties is they've got state-of-the-art Typhoon, fly-by-wire fighters, and then they've got old piston-engine World War II aircraft at the back, and they've got to try and keep everything as safe as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, safety is going to be uppermost, of course, in the minds of the military planners here, because at the end of the day, these aircraft aren't just flying over airfields, they're flying over central London with hundreds of thousands of people all gathered in below to see this spectacle. So if anything were to go wrong, there could be very significant consequences. So they'll be watching the weather, and it may be a last-minute decision. They may decide to shift it to a bit later in the day, but I don't think we'll know probably until the morning progresses and they get an idea of what these thunderclouds are going to be doing tomorrow.
Yeah, and what the cloud base, how low it comes, even though we can see the blue skies at the moment, which is rather encouraging. Mark, for the moment, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, let's move from Westminster Abbey to Westminster Cathedral, a bit further towards Victoria from here, because our London reporter Lisa Hartle is outside the cathedral, because religious leaders are gathering there to carry out what's called a walk of faith today to celebrate the coronation. Lisa, bring us up to date with who's going to be there and what they're going to be doing.
So this is a walk of faith, but there are many of them taking place across the country today and over the weekend. Today, there's 9 different faiths all coming together, different religions, to celebrate the coronation, because King Charles is the defender of all faiths. Joining me is the founder of A Walk of Faith, Maurice Ostrogue. If you come into the shot there, thank you. So tell us more about today. What's happening? I can see a lot of people, religious leaders, gathering behind you.
Yes, and we're very grateful to Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the head of the Roman Catholic Church, who has a role tomorrow in the coronation, as do others behind us from all different faiths. And this is happening across the country, from communities, from every faith, from all the nations of the UK. And at a time of rising racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, to see people come together, that unity is a real testament to King Charles and the affection and respect people have for him.
So you arranged these Walk of Faiths for the Jubilee, and now again. What kind of inspired you to want to do this?
So when the Queen, at the time of her coronation, decided to pick a number of charities, I think there were 5 or 6. One of them, unusually, because it's in the early 1950s, was the Council of Christians and Jews, which I was vice chair. And we wanted to do something special, not just from the Abrahamic faith, but from all the faiths together. And we all went together from around London to Westminster Abbey and met and had lunch there. And this is really now taking this forward, because King Charles, we were very privileged and honoured to be able to give him an award last year for the amazing amount of interfaith work that he does. And that's why it's very much reciprocated by people across the country who understand and appreciate the importance that he places on minority faiths and the values and the benefits that we have as a country that make us so strong by being united.
Now, there's quite a few religious leaders here today that have got a role in the coronation tomorrow. Have you spoken to them about how they're feeling, if they're feeling nervous?
I think they're very excited, and we all feel very privileged. And I think we do recognise that there are these unique moments in history where things can just come together. And I think we do feel that as a united kingdom, we will be a truly great Britain. And that has to be the message that we keep explaining to people who are concerned about some of the frictions that we see in society, that we do come together and we help each other, we support one another, and despite where we see media generally focusing where faith communities maybe have had issues, here we have a wonderful opportunity to show the positive strength and cohesion of our faith communities.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you go and get ready for the walk, which starts in about 4 minutes, doesn't it?
It does, thank you.
So the walk will leave here, Westminster Cathedral, and it will go to Westminster City Hall, where they shall all gather then and carry on celebrating the coronation and bringing all the faiths together.
You with that walk and all the other walks up and down the Mall. Time for me to walk now, but Patrick's about to walk in. The King's new best friend. Well, certainly it seems so after he got a word with him on the Mall. We'll be updating you with that here on GB News Live. Stay with us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, it's 3 o'clock. I am Patrick Christie's, and as you can see, I am back at Buckingham Palace. And we are just one day away now, aren't we? We're on the eve of the biggest event in this country's long and proud history. Well, one of them. Anyway, that's for sure. Behind me is the most famous building in the world, and King Charles will leave there from around 10:20 tomorrow morning as he makes his way to the UK's first coronation for 70 years. And ladies and gentlemen, check out what I've been up to today. Good luck for tomorrow.
Good luck. It's not mine, it's one of the soldiers. Well, they are roughing it a little bit. So. Didn't all get too wet, I hope.
How's that looking?
Not too wet.
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
Are you still, sir? Soldiers and yes.
joy to see you again. And I hope the Lord
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
It's this hand. It's this very hand has shaken the hand of a king. I can't quite believe it, but hey, what a way to start proceedings. I can now say I have officially met King Charles, although he was having nothing to do with any of my questioning, was he? But fair enough. He's got a lot on his mind. He doesn't seem particularly nervous, I must say, ahead of tomorrow. And it has been raining today, but the sun's out. We are basking in sunshine at the moment. It hasn't dampened the spirits, though, of a huge number of people